What does it mean to love in the shadow of death? To hold a light so fragile it might gutter in the merest breath of wind, yet bear it forward into a darkness that has no name. In the ancient lays of Middle-earth, where stars burn with the memory of creation, and the earth trembles with the weight of unmade destinies, there is a tale that sings of such a love, a tale not of conquest, but of defiance. It is the story of Beren, a mortal man, and Lúthien, an elven maid, whose hearts entwined beneath the eaves of a forest older than sorrow, and whose choices shook the foundations of the world. Theirs is not a story of triumph in the manner of kings who raise banners over fallen foes, nor of heroes who carve their names into the stone of time. It is a quieter, deeper victory, one wrought in the trembling spaces between hope and despair, where the soul must decide whether to falter or to endure. To speak of Beren and Lúthien is to speak of the human condition itself, for their tale is a mirror held up to our own fleeting lives. It asks us to consider what it means to bear a burden that seems too great, to face a temptation that promises rest, to walk a path where loss is certain, and yet to choose love, faith, and hope over the silence of surrender. Their story is a song, and like all true songs, it begins in a place of stillness, where the heart listens for a truth it cannot yet name. In the beginning there was a man named Beren, born of the house of Beor, a wanderer in a world already old with grief. His people were mortal, their lives brief as the flicker of a candle, yet fierce with a fire that burned against the encroaching dark. Beren knew loss as a companion long before he knew love. His father Barahir and his kin were hunted by the servants of Morgoth, the Dark Lord, whose malice lay like a shroud over the lands of Beleriand. Morgoth, once called Melkor, was the first shadow, the dissonance in the music of Ilúvatar, whose will sought to unmake all that was fair and free. His fortress of Angband loomed in the north, a place of iron and fire where hope went to die. Beren's early years were marked by flight and defiance. He was no stranger to fear, for it walked with him through the shadowed valleys of Dorthonion, where his people made their stand against the tides of orcs and worse that poured from Angband's gates. But fear in Beren's heart was not a master. It was a question. Each step he took, each breath he drew, was an answer to that question. Will you run forever, or will you turn and face the dark? When Barahir and his band were betrayed and slain, Beren alone escaped a fugitive in a land that had forgotten mercy. He fled south over mountains jagged as broken promises, through mists that whispered of despair. His heart was heavy with the weight of legacy, not the legacy of kings or conquerors, but of a father who had taught him that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act in spite of it. Beren carried this truth like an ember in his chest, glowing faintly against the cold. And so he came to Doriath, the hidden kingdom of Thingol and Melian, where the air was thick with enchantment and the trees sang of ages past. Doriath was a sanctuary guarded by the girdle of Melian, a weave of magic that turned aside all who bore ill intent. It was a place where time seemed to pause, where the stars reflected in the pools of Escalduin held secrets older than the sun. Yet even here in this haven of light, Beren was an intruder, a mortal man in a realm of immortals, a shadow trailing grief. It was in the glades of Neldoreth, beneath the silver beaches, that Beren first saw Lúthien. She danced in a clearing, her feet light as moonlight on water, her hair a cascade of midnight woven with starlight. She was the daughter of Thingol, a Sindarin king, and Melian, a Maya, whose voice had once shaped the music of the Ainur. Lúthien was beauty incarnate, but not the beauty of cold marble or fleeting youth. Hers was a beauty that pierced the heart, for it was alive with joy, with sorrow, with the weight of an immortal soul that had seen the birth of the world and yet chose to dance in its fleeting moments. Beren stood transfixed, his breath caught in his throat. He was a man of dust and blood, his hands stained with the grime of survival, his heart scarred by loss. She was a vision of eternity, untouchable, unattainable. Yet in that moment something stirred within him, a longing not for possession, but for meaning. To see Lúthien was to glimpse a truth beyond the veil of the world, a truth that whispered, "There is something worth fighting for, even if it costs you everything." He called her Tinuviel Nightingale, for her voice was a song that banished the shadows. And though he knew he was unworthy, though he knew his love was a defiance of fate itself, Beren stepped forward. He stepped into the light of her presence, and in that act he chose a path from which there could be no turning back. What is love if not a kind of madness? a willingness to stand before the vastness of the unknown and say, "I will not falter." Beren's love for Lúthien was no mere passion, no fleeting fire of the flesh. It was a vow, a sacred bond that tied his mortal soul to something greater than himself. Yet it was also a wound, for to love so fiercely is to invite pain, to invite loss. In Lúthien, Beren saw not only beauty, but the possibility of redemption, not for himself alone, but for a world that had grown weary under Morgoth's shadow. But love, like all sacred things, is tested. When Beren declared his heart to Thingol in the halls of Menegroth, the Elven king's wrath was a storm. Thingol was proud, his love for Lúthien both tender and possessive. To him, Beren was a beggar, a mortal whose life was a blink in the eyes of the Eldar. "No man shall have my daughter," Thingol declared, his voice echoing through the carven pillars of his hall. Yet Melian, wise and far-seeing, sat silent, her eyes tracing paths unseen. She knew that fate had already woven Beren and Lúthien into a tapestry that could not be undone. Thingol, in his pride, set a price for Lúthien's hand, a price meant to be impossible. "Bring me a Silmaril from the crown of Morgoth," he demanded, his words sharp as a blade. The Silmaril's jewels, crafted by Feanor in the bliss of Valinor, held the light of the two trees, the very essence of creation. They were wholly coveted and now bound to Morgoth's iron crown in the depths of Angband. To seek a Silmaril was to seek death, and Thingol knew it. Beren did not flinch. He looked into Thingol's eyes and said, "When I return, I shall hold you to your word." His voice was steady, but within his heart trembled, not with fear of Morgoth, but with the weight of what he had promised. To love Lúthien was to bear a burden greater than any man could carry alone, yet he would carry it for her, for the hope she kindled in him. The road to Angband was no mere path through the wild. It was a descent into the heart of despair, a journey where every step tested the soul. Beren set out alone, his cloak tattered, his sword worn but sharp. He moved through forests where the trees whispered of ancient betrayals, over plains where the wind carried the cries of the fallen. The world was vast and he was small, a single spark against the endless night. Yet he walked on, driven not by certainty, but by faith. Faith in the love that had awakened him. Faith in the possibility of a dawn he might never see. In the wilderness, Beren was not wholly alone. Finrod Felagund, king of Nargothrond, joined him, bound by an oath to Barahir's house. Finrod was an elf of great wisdom, his heart alight with the memory of Valinor's bliss. Yet even he who had walked in the light of the trees felt the shadow of their quest. With a small band of companions, they disguised themselves as orcs, creeping through the wastelands of Tar Nufuan, the forest of night where the air was thick with dread. Here the silence was a living thing. It pressed against Beren's heart, whispering of failure, of futility. What is one man against the might of Morgoth, it asked. What is love against the weight of eternity? The silence was temptation itself, offering rest, offering surrender. Beren felt it as all who bear great burdens do. To lay down his quest, to return to the quiet of obscurity would be so easy. Yet each time the silence spoke, he thought of Lúthien, her dance, her voice, her eyes that held the promise of a world renewed. And he walked on. Their disguise failed in the pass of Anak, where Sauron, Morgoth's lieutenant, held sway. Sauron was no mere servant, but a Maya of terrible power whose eyes saw through flesh to the secrets of the soul. In a contest of song and sorcery, Finrod strove against him, their voices weaving spells of power and counterpower. The air trembled with the clash of their wills, a battle not of swords, but of truths. Finrod sang of freedom, of the light of Valinor, of the unyielding spirit of the Eldar. Sauron answered with a song of dominion, of chains forged in fire, of a world bent to his master's will. Finrod faltered, not for lack of strength, but for the weight of memories of the kinslaying at Alqualande, of the doom pronounced upon the Noldor. His song wavered, and Sauron's power prevailed. Beren and his companions were cast into the pits of Tol and Gorhoth, Sauron's Isle of Werewolves, where darkness was a living thing and hope a distant dream. In the dungeons, Beren learned the true meaning of burden. The air was heavy with the stench of decay, the walls slick with the despair of those who had perished there. One by one his companions were taken, devoured by Sauron's wolves. Finrod, ever faithful, shielded Beren with his body, slaying a werewolf with his bare hands before he fell. His death was a sacrifice, a light extinguished so that Beren might endure. Alone in the dark, Beren sat with the silence. It was no longer a temptation, but a presence, a weight that pressed against his very soul. He thought of his father, of Finrod, of all who had died so that he might live. He thought of Lúthien so far away, her light a memory that both sustained and tormented him. What right have I to hope, he wondered. What right have I to love when all I touch turns to ash? Yet even in that place of despair a spark remained. It was not the spark of defiance nor of courage, but of something quieter, more enduring. It was the spark of faith not in victory, but in the act of striving. Beren closed his eyes and whispered Lúthien's name, not as a plea, but as a prayer. And in that moment, the silence was broken. Far away in Doriath, Lúthien felt the stirring of her heart. She was no passive maiden waiting in sorrow for her love's return. She was Tinuviel, whose voice could bend the winds, whose will was a flame that no shadow could quench. When Thingol sought to keep her safe, imprisoning her in a house of branches high in the trees, she wove a spell of her own, her hair growing long as a river of night, her song lulling the guards to sleep. She descended a shadow within a shadow and set out into the wild. Lúthien's journey was no less perilous than Beren's. She faced the world alone, her heart guided by a love that defied reason, defied fate. In the forests of Brethil she met Huan, the great hound of Valinor and Celegorm, and Curufin sons of Feanor, whose hearts were tangled in their own oaths and desires. Huan, loyal and true, chose to aid her, his strength a shield against the dangers of the wild. Together they came to Tolkien Middle-earth, where Beren languished. What is sacrifice if not the giving of oneself for another? Lúthien stood before Sauron's tower, her voice rising like a tide. She sang not of battle but of love of freedom, of a light that no darkness could devour. Her song was a weapon sharper than any blade, and Sauron's power quailed before it. The tower trembled, the wolves fled, and Sauron himself took the form of a great bat fleeing into the night. When Lúthien found Beren in the pits, he was a shadow of himself, his body broken, his spirit flickering. Yet when he saw her, when he heard her voice, he knew that he had not been forsaken. She knelt beside him, her hands gentle, her eyes fierce with a love that had crossed the world to find him. Tinuviel, he whispered, and in that word was all the hope he had left. Their reunion was no triumph, but a moment of grace. The road to Angband still lay before them, and the Silmaril was a distant dream. Yet in that moment Beren and Lúthien stood together, two souls bound by a love that had defied kings, defied gods, defied the very shadow of Morgoth. They were not heroes, not yet. They were simply a man and a maid choosing to walk forward hand in hand into a darkness that offered no promises. What does it mean to triumph over darkness? It is not to banish it. For darkness is eternal, as old as the void before the world was made. It is to carry a light, however small, and to hold it high even when the wind howls and the shadows close in. Beren and Lúthien carried such a light not because they were strong, but because they were faithful to each other, to the truth they had glimpsed in a glade beneath the stars, to the hope that love could be a song that even death could not silence. And so they walked on into the wild, into the shadow, into the heart of a tale that would echo through the ages. Their story was not yet finished, but it had begun, and in its beginning was a truth as old as the world, that love, though it may break the heart, is the only force that can mend it. The world does not pause for love, nor does it bend for the heart's quiet vows. Beyond the broken walls of Tolkien Middle-earth, where Lúthien's song had shattered Sauron's dominion, the wilds of Beleriand stretched vast and unyielding. Beren and Lúthien stood together, their hands clasped, their breaths mingling in the cold air, but the shadow of their quest loomed larger than ever. The Silmaril, that jewel of light forged in the dawn of time, lay entombed in Morgoth's crown deep within the iron hell of Angband. To seek it was to court annihilation, yet to turn back was to betray the love that had carried them this far. What is an oath if not a chain forged of words? Beren had sworn to Thingol that he would return with a Silmaril, a promise born of defiance and love, but now it bound him like a fetter. Each step he took toward the north was a step toward a darkness that swallowed hope, yet each step away would be a betrayal of the man he had chosen to be. Lúthien, too, was bound not by words spoken to a king, but by the silent vow of her heart. She had left the safety of Doriath, defied her father's will, and faced the terrors of Sauron's Isle, all for the man who stood beside her. Their love was a light, but it was also a burden, for to love so fiercely is to carry the weight of another's soul alongside your own. They lingered for a time in the ruins of Sauron's tower, the air heavy with the memory of Finrod's sacrifice. Beren's eyes were shadowed, his heart scarred by the loss of the elf king who had given his life to shield him. Lúthien's touch was gentle, her voice a balm, but even her presence could not erase the truth that gnawed at him. I am the cause of his death. I am the spark that kindles ruin. Yet Lúthien, with her far-seeing eyes, saw beyond his guilt. Finrod chose his path. She said her words soft as starlight. As we choose ours. Do not let sorrow become a chain heavier than the one we bear. Her words were a reminder, not a command. Beren nodded his jaw tight, and together they turned their faces northward. Huan, the great hound of Valinor, padded silently at their side, his eyes bright with a loyalty that needed no words. The world was vast, and they were small, but they were not alone. Not yet. The path to Angband was a wound in the earth, a scar carved by Morgoth's malice. The lands of Tar Nufwan, once a forest of beauty, were now a place of twisted roots and poisoned mists where the stars were veiled by a shroud of despair. Beren and Lúthien moved as shadows, their steps light, their voices hushed. The silence of the wild was not the silence of peace, but of waiting, a predator's silence, patient and cruel. Every rustle in the undergrowth, every flicker of movement in the dark was a reminder that Morgoth's eyes were many and his reach long. In this place, fear was not an emotion, but a presence. It coiled around Beren's heart, whispering of failure, of futility. You are one man, mortal and frail. What can you do against the might of a god? The Silmaril was a dream, a flicker of light in a sea of shadow, and to pursue it was to chase a star that had already fallen. Yet each time fear spoke, Beren looked to Lúthien. Her face, pale and resolute, was a beacon. She did not speak of victory or certainty, but of the act of walking forward, of choosing to defy the dark even when hope was a fragile thing. Lúthien, too, felt the weight of fear, though she bore it differently. She was immortal, her life woven into the fabric of the world, yet she walked beside a man whose days were numbered. To love Beren was to embrace loss, to know that time would claim him long before it touched her. In the quiet moments when they rested beneath the gnarled branches of Tar Nufwan, she watched him sleep, his chest rising and falling, his face lined with the cares of a mortal life. How brief you are, she thought, and how bright. Her fear was not of death, but of the emptiness that would follow when his light was gone. Yet Lúthien was no stranger to defiance. She had sung down Sauron's tower, bent the winds to her will, and faced the wrath of her father's pride. Fear could not master her, for her love was a flame that burned brighter than doubt. She wove spells of concealment, her voice soft as a lullaby, cloaking them from the eyes of Morgoth's spies. She sang of starlight, of rivers that ran free, of a world that could still be beautiful. And in her song, Beren found strength, not the strength of warriors, but of pilgrims who walk toward a shrine they may never reach. Their journey was not unbroken. In the desolate plains of Anfoglyth, where the earth was scorched and the air thick with ash, they were ambushed by Celegorm and Curufin, the sons of Feanor, whose hearts were bound to the Silmarils by an oath older and more terrible than Beren's. The brothers, exiled from Nargothrond, were driven by a fire that consumed reason. They saw in Beren a thief, a mortal who dared to touch what their father had wrought, and in Lúthien a prize to be claimed. The encounter was swift and brutal. Celegorm's spear gleamed in the dim light, Curufin's bow was drawn, and their voices were sharp with scorn. "You will not take what is ours!" Celegorm spat, his eyes blazing with the madness of the oath. Beren stood before Lúthien, his sword raised, his body a shield. But it was Huan who turned the tide. The hound, loyal to Lúthien and to the truth he sensed in her, turned on his former masters, his growl a thunder that shook the earth. Celegorm and Curufin fled their pride, broken their horses, scattering into the dust. The confrontation left Beren shaken, not by the threat of death, but by the glimpse of what an oath could do. The sons of Feanor were bound by words spoken in the heat of passion, words that had twisted their souls into something cruel and unyielding. Beren thought of his own promise to Thingol, spoken in love, but no less binding. Will I become like them, he wondered. Will my oath make me a stranger to myself? Lúthien saw the shadow in his eyes. She took his hand, her touch steady, and said, "An oath is only as true as the heart that speaks it. Yours is not a chain, Beren, but a thread that ties you to me." Her words were not a comfort, but a challenge to remember why he had sworn to hold fast to the love that had kindled his resolve. Beren nodded, and they pressed on the dust of Anfoglyth, clinging to their cloaks, the weight of the oath heavier than ever. As they drew closer to Angband, the world grew darker. The mountains of Thangorodrim loomed on the horizon, their peaks jagged as the teeth of a beast. The air was thick with the stench of sulfur, the ground cracked and barren. Here Morgoth's power was a tangible thing, a pressure that pressed against the soul. Beren felt it in his bones, a weariness that went beyond the body. Lúthien felt it in her spirit, a shadow that sought to dim the light of her song. Even Juan's steps grew heavy, his ears twitching at sounds no mortal could hear. In this place temptation was not a whisper, but a roar. It came to Beren in the form of doubt, offering a vision of a life unburdened by the quest. "Return to Doriath," it said. "Live quietly with Lúthien in the forests of Neldoreth. Let the Silmaril remain in Morgoth's crown. What is one jewel against the peace of your days?" The temptation was cruel, for it promised not power or glory, but the very thing Beren longed for, a life with Lúthien, free from the shadow of death. Lúthien too faced temptation, though it wore a different face. Her immortality was a gift, but also a curse, for it bound her to a world that would outlast Beren. "Let him go," the shadow whispered. "Spare him the pain of this quest. Spare yourself the grief of his loss. To turn back would be to keep Beren safe, to hold him a little longer. Yet to turn back would be to deny the love that had brought her here, to diminish the man she loved into something less than he was." They spoke of it only once, in a hollow beneath the eaves of a dead forest where the wind moaned like a mourner. Beren's voice was low, his eyes fixed on the ground. "I would spare you this," he said. "I would take you back to Doriath, where you could be safe, where we could be together." Lúthien's answer was fierce, her eyes alight with a fire that burned away doubt. "I am not a treasure to be kept, Beren. I am your partner in this. If you walk into the dark, I walk with you. If you fall, I fall. There is no safety without you." Her words were a vow stronger than any oath spoken to a king. Beren took her hand, and in that touch was a promise. "We will face this together, come what may." Juan lay at their feet, his great head resting on his paws, his presence a silent affirmation. The temptation passed, not because it was weak, but because their love was stronger. At the gates of Angband, the world seemed to end. The doors were vast, forged of iron, blacker than night, carved with runes that burned with malice. Above them, the peaks of Thangorodrim smoked and rumbled their fires, a mockery of the stars. The air was thick with dread, a weight that pressed against the chest, stealing breath. Here Morgoth's power was absolute, his will a tide that sought to drown all who stood against it. Beren and Lúthien stood before the gates, their cloaks tattered, their faces gaunt. Juan's fur was matted, his eyes bright with a fierce resolve. They were small, so small against the vastness of Morgoth's fortress, yet they did not falter. Lúthien's hand rested on Beren's arm, her touch a reminder of why they had come. Beren's sword hung at his side, its edge dulled but unyielding, a symbol of his refusal to yield. It was Lúthien who acted first. She stepped forward, her voice rising in a song that was both a challenge and a prayer. It was not the song of battle nor of defiance, but of creation, of the music of Ilúvatar, of the light of the two trees, of a world that could still be whole. Her voice was a thread of silver in the dark, weaving a spell of slumber that spread like a tide. The orcs at the gates fell, their weapons clattering to the ground. The wolves of Angband whimpered and fled. Even the Balrogs, those demons of fire and shadow, paused, their flames dimming in the face of her power. Beren watched, his heart swelling with awe and sorrow. Lúthien was a flame burning so brightly it might consume her. He knew the cost of her song, the strength it drew from her immortal soul. Yet he could not stop her, for to stop her would be to deny who she was. Instead, he stood at her side, his presence a silent vow. "I am here. I will not leave you." The gates of Angband opened not with a crash, but with a groan, as if the earth itself mourned what lay within. Beyond them was darkness, a darkness that was not the absence of light, but the presence of something older, hungrier. Morgoth's throne room lay at the heart of Angband, a vast cavern where the air was thick with the weight of his malice. His crown, studded with the Silmarils, gleamed with a light that was both beautiful and terrible, a mockery of the holiness it had once held. Morgoth sat upon his throne, his form vast and terrible, his eyes burning with a fire that saw through flesh to the secrets of the soul. He was the first shadow, the dissonance in the music, the will that sought to unmake all that was good. Yet even he was not immune to Lúthien's power. Her song wove around him a spell of slumber that clouded his mind, dimmed his fire. His head bowed, his eyes closed, and he fell into a sleep deeper than any he had known. The Silmarils burned in his crown, their light calling to Beren like a star in the night. He climbed the steps to the throne, his heart pounding, his hands trembling. The air was thick with Morgoth's presence, a weight that pressed against his soul. He drew his knife, its edge gleaming in the Silmarils' light, and began to pry the jewel free. The first Silmaril came loose, its warmth flooding his hand, its light banishing the shadows of Angband. But greed, even the greed for light, is a dangerous thing. Beren's heart stirred with a sudden thought. If one Silmaril is enough, what of two? What of three? The temptation was fleeting, but it was enough. As he reached for a second jewel, his knife snapped its blade, grazing Morgoth's cheek. The Dark Lord stirred his eyes, flickering open, and the spell of slumber began to fray. Lúthien's voice faltered, her strength waning. Beren seized her hand. The Silmaril clutched to his chest, and they fled. Huan led the way, his growls a warning to the waking horrors of Angband. The halls trembled, the air filled with the cries of orcs and the roar of balrogs. They ran their breaths ragged, their hearts pounding until they burst into the open air, the gates of Angband slamming shut behind them. They did not stop to rest. The Silmaril burned in Beren's hand, its light a beacon that drew the eyes of Morgoth's servants. They fled south through the ash-choked plains of Anfauglith, through the twisted woods of Tar Nufuen. The world was alive with pursuit. Wolves howled in the distance, the sky darkened with the wings of fell beasts. Lúthien's strength was spent, her face pale, her steps unsteady. Beren carried her when she stumbled, his own body pushed beyond its limits. Huan guarded their flank, his teeth bared, his eyes fierce. In a clearing beneath the stars, they paused their breaths, heaving their bodies, trembling. The Silmaril lay between them, its light casting long shadows on the ground. Beren looked at it, his heart torn between triumph and dread. They had done the impossible, they had stolen a Silmaril from Morgoth's crown. Yet the cost was written in Lúthien's weary eyes, in the blood that stained his hands, in the memory of Finrod's sacrifice. "What have we done?" he whispered, not to Lúthien but to the night. The Silmaril was a victory, but it was also a wound, a reminder of the darkness they had faced, the darkness that still pursued them. Lúthien took his hand, her touch steady despite her weariness. "We have chosen," she said, "and we will choose again." Her words were not a promise of victory, but of endurance. They rose, the Silmaril hidden beneath Beren's cloak, and continued south toward Doriath, toward Thingol's hall, toward a reckoning that would test their love anew. The road was long, and the shadow of Morgoth was not so easily outrun. Yet they walked on hand in hand, their hearts bound by a truth that no darkness could break, that love, though it may lead through fire and shadow, is the only path to light. The Silmaril was a star in Beren's hand, its light pulsing like a heart warm and alive, yet heavy with a weight that went beyond its form. It was no mere jewel, but a fragment of creation's dawn forged by Feanor, in the bliss of Valinor, imbued with the radiance of the two trees. To hold it was to hold a piece of eternity, a light that had burned before the sun and moon were kindled. Yet to hold it was also to bear a curse, for the Silmarils were bound to the fate of the world, their beauty a flame that drew both love and ruin. Beren and Lúthien, fleeing the horrors of Angband, carried this light through the desolate wastes of Beleri, and their steps dogged by the shadow of Morgoth's wrath. The world was no longer a place of quiet paths or hidden glades. The air trembled with the distant howls of wolves, the sky flickered with the wings of creatures that served the Dark Lord. Beren's cloak was tattered, his body worn to the bone, yet he moved with a purpose that defied exhaustion. Lúthien walked beside him, her face pale, her strength sapped by the song that had felled Morgoth's court. Huan, the Hound of Valinor, guarded their rear, his eyes scanning the horizon, his growls a warning to the unseen. They were three against a world that seemed to conspire against them, yet they pressed on, driven by a love that had already defied gods and kings. What is triumph if not the refusal to yield? The Silmaril was theirs, wrested from the iron crown of the enemy, but it was no victory. It was a burden, a beacon that marked them as prey. Beren felt its weight in his heart, a reminder of the oath he had sworn to Thingol, of the lives lost to bring him this far. Lúthien felt it in her soul, a light that both sustained and consumed her, for she had poured her immortal essence into the song that had won it. Their journey was not a march to glory, but a pilgrimage through a wilderness of doubt where every step tested the truth of their love. The plains of Anfauglith were a graveyard of ash and bone, scorched by Morgoth's fires, haunted by the ghosts of battles past. The ground crunched beneath their feet, the air thick with the stench of decay. Beren clutched the Silmaril beneath his cloak, its light muffled but unquenched. He moved with the caution of a hunted man, his eyes darting to every shadow, his hand never far from his sword. Lúthien's steps were slower, her breath shallow, yet her gaze was steady, her will unbroken. She sang softly, a thread of melody that wove a veil of concealment around them, dimming their presence to the eyes of Morgoth's spies. In the silence between her songs, doubt crept in. Beren's mind turned to the moment in Angband when his knife had snapped against Morgoth's crown, when the temptation to take a second Silmaril had stirred in his heart. Was it greed, he wondered, or was it hope twisted by the weight of the quest? The memory gnawed at him, a wound that bled shame. He had faced the Dark Lord and lived, yet he felt no pride, only a creeping fear that he had brought a greater doom upon them all. Lúthien sensed his turmoil. She took his hand, her fingers cool against his fevered skin. "The Silmaril is not your sin," she said, her voice soft but firm. "It is a light, and you are its bearer. Do not let its weight become your judge." Her words were not a balm, but a mirror reflecting the truth he had forgotten, that love, not perfection, had brought them this far. Beren nodded, his grip tightening on her hand, and they pressed on the Silmaril, a star hidden in the folds of his cloak. But the world was not kind to bearers of light. In the shadowed hills of Himlad, where the rivers ran cold and the stones whispered of betrayal, they were ambushed. Not by orcs or balrogs, but by Celegorm and Curufin, the sons of Feanor, whose oath to reclaim the Silmarils burned like a fever in their blood. The brothers had tracked them from Anfoglith, their horses swift, their hearts hardened by the curse of their father's vow. Celegorm's voice was a snarl, his spear leveled at Beren's chest. "You will not keep what is ours, mortal." Curufin's bow was drawn, his eyes glittering with a hunger that went beyond reason. The Silmarils were their birthright, their obsession, and the sight of Beren, a man of dust and blood, daring to hold one, was an affront to their pride. Beren stood before Lúthien, his sword raised, his body a shield. This jewel was won by her song, he said, his voice steady despite the fear that coiled in his gut. "It is not yours to claim." The words were a defiance, but they were also a plea, for Beren knew the madness of oaths, the way they twisted the soul into something cruel and unyielding. When loyal and fierce turned on the brothers, his growl a thunder that shook the earth. The hound's betrayal was a wound to Celegorm, who had once called him friend, but Huan's heart was bound to Lúthien, to the truth he sensed in her. He lunged, his teeth bared, and the brothers faltered. Curufin loosed an arrow not at Beren but at Lúthien, its tip glinting with malice. Beren threw himself before her, the arrow piercing his shoulder, its pain a fire that seared his flesh. Lúthien's cry was a song of wrath, her voice rising like a storm. She wove a spell of wind and shadow, a tempest that drove the brothers back, their horses rearing in terror. Huan pursued them, his jaws snapping, until they fled into the hills, their curses swallowed by the wind. Beren fell to his knees, blood pooling beneath him, the Silmaril still clutched in his hand. Lúthien knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she pressed them to his wound. Her song was no longer one of power, but of healing, a melody that drew on the last of her strength. The bleeding slowed, the pain eased, but Beren's face was pale, his breath ragged. "I would die for you," he whispered, his eyes fixed on hers. Lúthien's answer was fierce, her voice breaking. "You will live for me." They could not linger. The wound was bound, the Silmaril hidden, but the pursuit was relentless. Morgoth's wolves were on their trail, their howls a chorus of hunger and rage. The sky darkened with the wings of fell beasts, their cries a mockery of the stars. Beren leaned on Lúthien, his steps unsteady, his vision blurred. She bore his weight without complaint, her arm around his waist, her song a faint hum that kept the shadows at bay. Huan scouted ahead, his nose to the ground, his ears pricked for danger. In the forests of Brethil, where the trees were old and the air thick with memory, they found a moment of respite. A stream ran clear over stones smoothed by time, its music a counterpoint to the distant howls. Lúthien bathed Beren's wound, her touch gentle, her eyes shadowed with worry. The Silmaril lay between them, its light casting patterns on the forest floor, a dance of radiance and shadow. Beren looked at the jewel, his heart heavy with a truth he could no longer ignore. "This light is not ours," he said, his voice low. "It belongs to the world, to the ages before us, to the ages yet to come. We are its keepers, but not its masters." Lúthien nodded, her hand resting on his. "Yet we carry it," she said, "and in carrying it we carry hope." Her words were a reminder of the deeper truth they had glimpsed in the glades of Neldoreth when their love had first taken root. The Silmaril was a symbol not of victory, but of defiance, a light that burned in the face of darkness, a song that sang against despair. To bear it was to bear the weight of the world's longing, its pain, its fragile hope. But hope is a fragile thing, and the world was not done testing them. In the night, as they rested beneath the boughs, a new danger came. Not wolves or orcs, but Carcharoth, the greatest of Morgoth's wolves, a beast bred in the pits of Angband, fed on the flesh of the fallen. His eyes burned red, his jaws dripped with venom, and his hunger was a thing of nightmare. Morgoth had loosed him to hunt the bearers of the Silmaril, and his nose had found their scent. Hwin met him first, a clash of fang and claw that shook the forest. The hound was mighty, his strength born of Valinor's light, but Carcharoth was a monster, his power fueled by Morgoth's malice. Beren rose his wound, screaming, his sword in hand. Lúthien sang her voice, a thread of power that sought to bind the beast, but Carcharoth's will was iron, his rage a fire that burned through her spell. Beren thrust the Silmaril before him, its light blazing like a star. Carcharoth faltered, his eyes blinded by the radiance, but his hunger was stronger than fear. He lunged his jaws, closing around Beren's hand, swallowing the Silmaril and the flesh that held it. Beren fell, his cry a sound of agony, his body racked with pain. The Silmaril burned within Carcharoth's belly, a torment that drove him mad, and he fled into the night, his howls a scream that tore the air. Lúthien knelt beside Beren, her hands on his ruined arm, her song a desperate plea. Hwin returned bloodied but unbowed, his head bowed in grief. Beren's breath was shallow, his face ashen, but his eyes found Lúthien's, and in them was a love that no pain could dim. "I am still here," he whispered, and she wept, her tears falling like rain. They could not stay in Brethil. The forest was alive with danger, the air thick with the scent of blood. Lúthien bound Beren's wound, her hands steady despite the fear that clawed at her heart. The Silmaril was gone, lost in the belly of a monster, yet the oath remained a chain that bound them to their path. They moved south toward Doriath, toward Thingol's hall, where the truth of their quest would be laid bare. Beren was weak, his body failing, yet he walked his will a fire that burned brighter than his pain. Lúthien supported him, her strength a miracle, her song a shield against the shadows that pursued them. Hwin guarded their path, his loyalty a light in the dark. The world was vast and they were small, but they were not broken. Not yet. In the hills of Dorthonion, where Beren's kin had once made their stand, they paused. The land was a ruin, its beauty marred by Morgoth's fire, yet it held a memory of defiance, of a people who had faced the dark and refused to yield. Beren knelt among the stones, his hand pressed to the earth, his heart heavy with the weight of legacy. "This is where my father fell," he said, his voice a whisper. "This is where I learned what it means to fight." Lúthien knelt beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "And this is where you will rise," she said. Her words were not a promise, but a truth, a reminder that love is not a shield against pain, but a reason to endure it. Beren rose, his face set, his eyes fixed on the south. The Silmaril was lost, but their love was not, and in that love was a strength that no darkness could quench. The borders of Doriath were a sanctuary guarded by the girdle of Melian, a weave of magic that turned aside all who bore ill intent. Yet even here the shadow of their quest followed. The people of Doriath whispered of Carcharoth, the wolf whose madness had spread like a plague, his path a trail of blood and ruin. The Silmaril burned within him, a light that tormented his flesh, driving him toward the hidden kingdom. Thingol's hall was a place of beauty, its pillars carved with the likeness of trees, its air thick with the scent of flowers. Yet when Beren and Lúthien stood before the king, there was no warmth in his eyes. He saw Beren's ruined hand, Lúthien's weary face, and the absence of the Silmaril. "You have failed," he said, his voice cold as stone. "You swore to bring me a Silmaril, and you return with nothing but wounds." Beren stood tall, his pain a fire that burned but did not break him. "I held the Silmaril in my hand," he said, his voice steady, "and it is not lost. It burns in the belly of Carcharoth, and I will face him again." His words were a defiance, not of Thingol, but of the despair that sought to claim him. Lúthien stepped forward, her hand in his, her eyes fierce. "We have faced Morgoth's throne," she said. "We will face this wolf, together." Thingol's pride wavered, his heart stirred by the love that shone between them. Melian, silent and wise, met Lúthien's gaze, and in her eyes was a knowing, a glimpse of the fate that wove their paths. The king relented, his voice softer. "Then face the wolf," he said, "and may the light you seek be your guide." The hunt for Carcharoth was no mere chase, but a reckoning. The wolf's madness had brought him to the borders of Doriath, his howls a challenge that shook the earth. Thingol gathered his warriors, their spears gleaming, their hearts steeled for battle. Beren, though weak, took up his sword, his will stronger than his body. Lúthien walked beside him, her song a shield, her love a flame. Huan led the way, his nose to the ground, his heart bound to the task. In the glades of Neldoreth, where Lúthien had first danced, they found Carcharoth. He was a nightmare, his fur matted with blood, his eyes burning with the Silmarill's light. The hunt was a storm of steel and song of fang and fire. Beren struck his sword, biting deep, but Carcharoth's jaws closed around him, his teeth a vice of agony. Lúthien sang her voice a tide that bound the wolf, slowing his movements, dimming his rage. Huan leaped his teeth, tearing at Carcharoth's throat, his strength a match for the beast's fury. The battle was a blur, a dance of life and death. Beren fell, his body broken, his breath fading. Carcharoth staggered, his belly torn open, the Silmaril spilling forth in a blaze of light. Huan's jaws closed one final time and the wolf fell, his howls silenced, his body a ruin. Lúthien knelt beside Beren, her hands on his face, her song a plea that reached beyond the world. The Silmaril lay beside them, its light a star in the grass, but Beren's eyes were dim, his life slipping away. Tinuviel, he whispered, and in that word was all the love he had ever known. Lúthien wept, her tears falling on his face, her heart breaking under the weight of loss. The Silmaril was returned to Thingol, its light a testament to their sacrifice. But the hall of Menegroth was silent, its beauty dimmed by grief. Beren lay in a chamber of stone, his body still, his spirit gone. Lúthien sat beside him, her hand in his, her song a lament that echoed through the ages. She had faced Morgoth, defied kings, sung down towers, but this was a foe she could not conquer. Yet love is not so easily broken. In the silence of her grief, Lúthien's spirit followed Beren's a journey beyond the circles of the world, to the halls of Mandos, where the souls of the dead await their fate. There, before the Vala of Doom, she sang a song of sorrow and love, a melody that moved even the heart of stone. Mandos, stern and unyielding, was stirred, and a choice was offered to return to Middle-earth, to live as mortals, to know joy and pain, and to die together. Lúthien chose not for herself, but for Beren, for the love that had carried them through fire and shadow. They returned, their lives entwined, their days numbered but bright. The Silmaril was set in a necklace, a light that shone in Doriath, a symbol of their triumph, not over Morgoth, but over despair, over the darkness that seeks to break the heart. Their story was not finished, but it had reached a turning, a moment of revelation that echoed like a song fading into memory. To triumph over darkness is not to banish it, but to carry a light, to love fiercely, to choose hope even when the world offers none. Beren and Lúthien walked on hand in hand, their love, a star that burned against the night, a truth that no shadow could silence. The halls of Mandos are not a place for the living. They are a realm of shadow and silence where the souls of the departed linger bound by the threads of fate woven at the world's beginning. Yet it was here in this vast and solemn stillness that Lúthien's voice rose, a song not of defiance but of sorrow so pure it pierced the veil between life and death. Her melody was a tapestry of love and loss, each note a memory of Beren's touch, his quiet courage, his mortal heart that had burned so brightly against the dark. Before Mandos, the Vala of Doom, whose heart was stone, her song was a plea, a prayer, a demand that love might defy even the laws of creation. Mandos listened, his eyes unreadable, his presence a weight that pressed against the soul. The Valar are not swayed by mortal passions, yet Lúthien was no mortal. She was the daughter of Melian, a Maya who had shaped the music of Ilúvatar, and her voice carried the echo of that primal song. Her sorrow was not for herself alone, but for Beren, for the man who had faced Morgoth's throne, who had held a Silmaril, who had loved her with a fierceness that shook the stars. To lose him was to lose a part of the world's light, a truth that even Mandos could not deny. A choice was offered, a choice no other had been granted. Lúthien could return to Middle-earth, but not as an immortal. She could walk again with Beren, their lives entwined, but their days would be numbered, their end certain. To choose mortality was to embrace loss, to trade eternity for a fleeting span of joy and pain. Yet Lúthien did not hesitate. Her love was not a thing of years or ages, but of moments that burned brighter than the stars, moments that no darkness could erase. She chose Beren, chose mortality, chose a life that would end, but would be theirs. And so they returned, not as heroes crowned with glory, but as two souls bound by a love that had moved the heart of doom. The world they returned to was not the world they had left. The Silmaril shone in Thingol's hall, a light that drew both awe and envy, a beacon that stirred the currents of fate. Beren and Lúthien were changed, their spirits marked by the shadow of Mandos, their hearts heavy with the knowledge of their mortality. Yet in their eyes was a quiet fire, a resolve to live, to love, to carry the light they had won through the days that remained. The forests of Doriath were a sanctuary, their silver beaches whispering of ages past, their streams singing of a world that could still be beautiful. Beren and Lúthien dwelt in a glade near the river Esgulduin, where the stars reflected in the water like memories of Valinor. Their home was simple, a bower of woven branches, its walls alive with the scent of moss and flowers. Here they were not a man and a maid who had defied Morgoth, but simply Beren and Lúthien, two hearts finding solace in the quiet of each other's presence. Beren's hand, scarred and maimed by Carcharoth's jaws, was a reminder of their journey, a wound that ached in the cold of morning. Yet he worked the land with a strength born of love, his laughter a sound that warmed the glade. Lúthien danced as she had in Neldoreth, her feet light on the grass, her hair a cascade of midnight woven with starlight. Her immortality was gone, but her beauty was undimmed, a radiance that came not from her lineage but from the truth she carried in her heart. What is life, if not a series of choices? To live as mortals was to choose each day to weave a tapestry of moments that would fade but not be forgotten. Beren and Lúthien chose to love, to laugh, to mourn, to hope. They chose to plant seeds in the earth, to watch the seasons turn, to listen to the wind that carried the songs of the Eldar. They chose to be not for eternity, but for now, and in that choice was a triumph deeper than any victory over Morgoth. Yet the world beyond their glade was not still. The Silmaril set in a necklace crafted by the smiths of Menegroth was a light that stirred the hearts of all who saw it. To the elves of Doriath it was a symbol of hope, a reminder of the light that had shone before the sun. To the sons of Feanor it was a wound, a call to the oath that bound their souls. To Morgoth, far in the north, it was a theft, a spark that fueled his malice. The Silmaril was a star, but it was also a storm, and its light cast long shadows across Beleriand. In the quiet of their days, Beren and Lúthien spoke of the Silmaril, their voices low, their words heavy with meaning. "It is not ours," Beren said, his eyes fixed on the river where the water caught the light of the stars. "We won it, but we cannot keep it. It belongs to the world, to the light that came before us." Lúthien nodded, her hand resting on his. "Yet we bore it," she said. "And in bearing it, we bore the weight of hope." Their words were not a surrender, but a recognition. The Silmaril was a gift, but also a responsibility, a light that demanded to be guarded, not hoarded. They knew its presence in Doriath was a danger, a beacon that would draw the eyes of those who coveted it. Yet they also knew that to hide it, to bury it in the earth, would be to deny the truth they had fought for. That light, however fragile, must shine even in the face of darkness. Thingol, proud and fierce, wore the Silmaril as a crown, its light a testament to his daughter's courage, to the love that had defied him. Yet his pride was a flame that burned too brightly, a spark that kindled unrest. The dwarves of Nogrod, who had crafted the necklace, gazed upon the Silmaril with a hunger that grew into obsession. Their hearts, skilled in the ways of stone and metal, were not immune to the jewel's call, and their whispers turned to plans, their plans to treachery. Beren and Lúthien, dwelling in their glade, felt the ripples of this unrest like a wind that carries the scent of a coming storm. They heard the tales brought by travelers of the dwarves' growing discontent, of the sons of Feanor's restless movements in the east. They saw the shadow in Thingol's eyes, a shadow born not of fear, but of possession. The Silmaril was a light, but it was also a chain binding those who loved it to a fate they could not escape. One evening, as the stars burned bright above the glade, Beren sat with Lúthien, his head resting against her shoulder. "I wonder," he said, his voice soft, "if we were wrong to take it. If the Silmaril was meant to remain in Angband, locked in Morgoth's crown, where none could touch it." Lúthien's answer was gentle but firm. "We took it not for ourselves, but for love. And love, though it may wound, is never wrong." Her words were a reminder of the truth they had glimpsed in the darkness of Angband when her song had felled Morgoth's court, when Beren had held the Silmaril in his hand. They had not sought the jewel for glory, but for each other, for the hope that their love could be a light against the dark. Yet that hope was a fragile thing, tested by the world's hunger, by the oaths that bound others to the same light. The storm broke in the heart of Doriath. The dwarves of Nogrod, driven by greed, demanded the Silmaril as payment for their craft. Thingol, his pride unyielding, refused his words sharp as a blade. The dwarves' anger turned to violence, and blood was spilled in the halls of Menegroth. Thingol fell, his crown shattered, the Silmaril torn from his grasp. The dwarves fled, their hands stained with the blood of a king, the jewel a burning weight in their possession. The news reached Beren and Lúthien like a thunderclap. They stood in their glade, their faces pale, their hearts heavy with grief. Thingol had been proud, but he was Lúthien's father, a king who had loved her in his way. His death was a wound, a reminder of the Silmaril's cost, of the darkness that followed its light. Beren took Lúthien's hand, his voice steady despite the sorrow in his eyes. "We must go," he said. "The Silmaril is our burden, and we cannot let it fall to those who would use it for harm." Lúthien nodded, her eyes fierce, with a resolve that burned brighter than her grief. They left their glade, their home, their sanctuary, and set out into the wild once more. Huan, ever loyal, followed his steps silent, his heart bound to theirs. The world was vast, and they were mortal, but they were not alone. Not yet. The pursuit of the dwarves was a journey through a land scarred by war and betrayal. The forests of Doriath gave way to the hills of Osiriand, where the rivers ran swift and the stones whispered of ancient sorrows. Beren moved with a strength born of necessity, his maimed hand a constant pain, his heart driven by the need to reclaim the light they had won. Lúthien walked beside him, her song a shield, her love a flame that burned against the cold. The dwarves were swift, their greed a spur that drove them through the wild, yet they were not unopposed. The elves of Doriath, led by Mablung and Beleg, hunted them, their spears gleaming, their hearts burning with vengeance for their king. The clash came in a valley near the river Ascar, where the waters ran red with blood. The dwarves fought with the ferocity of those who know they are damned, but the elves were relentless, their grief a fire that consumed all in its path. Beren and Lúthien arrived as the battle waned, the ground littered with the fallen, the air thick with the stench of death. The Silmaril lay in the grass, its light a star amidst the ruin, guarded by a dying dwarf whose eyes were dim with regret. Beren knelt beside him, his voice low. "This light was never yours," he said, not with anger, but with sorrow. The dwarf's breath rattled his hand, falling limp, and Beren took the Silmaril, its warmth a familiar weight in his palm. Lúthien stood beside him, her face pale, her eyes tracing the carnage around them. "This is what it brings," she said, her voice a whisper. "This is the cost of light." Beren nodded, his heart heavy with the truth of her words. The Silmaril was a gift, but also a curse, a light that kindled both hope and ruin. To bear it was to bear the weight of the world's longing, its pain, its fragile dreams. They did not return to Doriath. The halls of Menegroth were a place of grief, their beauty marred by blood and betrayal. Instead, Beren and Lúthien turned south toward the Isle of Tol Galen, a green haven in the river Adurant, where the waters sang of peace. Here they made their home a place of quiet beauty, where the Silmaril could shine without drawing the eyes of the world. Tol Galen was a sanctuary, but it was not a refuge. The Silmaril, set in a simple pendant, hung in their bower, its light a star that illuminated their days. Yet Beren and Lúthien knew its presence was a danger, a call to those who coveted it. The sons of Feanor, bound by their oath, would not rest while a Silmaril remained beyond their grasp. Morgoth, in his iron fortress, would not forget the theft of his crown's jewel. The world was vast, and they were mortal, but they were not blind to the storm that gathered on the horizon. In the quiet of their days, they spoke of the future of the child they would bear, of the legacy they would leave. Lúthien's hand rested on her belly, her eyes soft with a hope that was both joy and sorrow. "Our child will carry our light," she said, her voice a song, "and our love." Beren nodded, his maimed hand, finding hers, his heart swelling with a love that no time could diminish. Their son Dior was born in the light of the Silmaril, his eyes bright with the fire of his parents' love. He was a child of mortal and immortal, a bridge between worlds, a hope for a future that might heal the wounds of the past. Beren and Lúthien raised him in the quiet of Tol Galen, teaching him the songs of the Eldar, the courage of men, the truth that love is a light that burns even in the darkest night. Yet the world does not pause for love, nor does it bend for the heart's quiet vows. The sons of Feanor, driven by their oath, came to Tol Galen, their swords drawn, their eyes burning with a hunger that had consumed their souls. They demanded the Silmaril, their voices sharp with the madness of their vow. Beren stood before them, his maimed hand empty, his heart steady. "This light was won by love," he said, "and it will not be taken by force." The confrontation was swift and brutal. Beren fought with the strength of a man who had faced Morgoth, his sword a flash of defiance. Lúthien sang, her voice a shield that turned aside the blades of her foes. Huan, ever loyal, fought at their side, his teeth a thunder that shook the earth. The sons of Feanor faltered their oath, a chain that bound them to ruin, and they fled, their hearts broken by the light they could not claim. But the battle was not without cost. Beren was wounded, his body bleeding, his breath shallow. Lúthien knelt beside him, her song a plea, her tears falling like rain. The Silmaril shone above them, its light a star that illuminated their pain, their love, their fragile hope. Beren took her hand, his voice a whisper. "We have carried the light," he said, "and it will shine beyond us." Their days grew shorter, their bodies frail, but their love was undimmed. In the quiet of Tol Galen they watched the stars, their hands entwined, their hearts bound by a truth that no darkness could break. The Silmaril passed to J.R.R, a legacy of light and love, a hope for a world that might yet be whole. Beren and Lúthien's story was not a triumph in the manner of kings or conquerors, but a quieter, deeper victory, a victory of the heart of the soul that chooses to love, to hope, to carry the light even when the world offers no promises. Their love was a song, and like all true songs, it faded into memory, its echoes lingering in the stars, in the rivers, in the hearts of those who heard it. To triumph over darkness is not to banish it, but to live in its presence, to love fiercely, to choose each day to be a bearer of light. Beren and Lúthien chose, and in their choosing they wove a tale that would shine through the ages, a star that no shadow could extinguish. The Isle of Tol Galen was a cradle of green nestled in the arms of the river Adarant, where the waters sang soft lullabies, and the trees stood sentinel against the sorrows of the world. Here Beren and Lúthien lived as mortals, their days woven with the quiet threads of love and labor. The Silmaril hung in their bower, a pendant of light that cast its radiance over the glade, a star bound to earth. Their son J.R.R grew in its glow, his laughter a melody that mingled with the river's song, his eyes bright with the fire of his parents' legacy. Yet even in this haven the world's shadow lingered, a whisper of unrest that stirred the air like a storm gathering beyond the horizon. What is peace if not a moment held against the tide of time? For Beren and Lúthien, peace was not the absence of fear, but the choice to live fully in the present, to cherish each dawn, each touch, each breath. Their mortality was a gift and a wound, a reminder that their days were numbered, yet each one burned with a clarity that eternity could not match. They tended their garden-wove stories for J.R.R and watched the stars, their hands entwined, their hearts anchored in the love that had defied gods and darkness. But the Silmaril was a light that could not be hidden. Its radiance was a call, a beacon that stirred the hearts of those bound to its fate. The sons of Feanor, chained by their father's oath, felt its pull, their souls tormented by the jewel they could not claim. Morgoth in his iron fortress of Angband nursed his wrath, his mind fixed on the theft of his crown's glory. Even the elves of Doriath, grieving the loss of Thingol, looked to the Silmaril with a longing that bordered on obsession. The light that Beren and Lúthien had won was a hope, but also a danger, a flame that kindled both love and ruin. In the quiet of Tol Galen, Beren and Lúthien felt the weight of this truth. They spoke of it in hushed tones, their voices mingling with the river's murmur, their eyes tracing the Silmaril's glow. "It is a star," Beren said, his voice heavy with wonder and sorrow. "But stars do not belong to men or elves. They shine for all, or they fall." Lúthien nodded, her hand resting on his, her heart echoing his words. "We are its keepers," she said, "but we cannot hold it forever. It will pass as we will pass, and its light will endure." Their words were not a surrender, but a reckoning, a recognition that love, however fierce, cannot possess. The Silmaril was theirs, but only for a time, a light entrusted to them until the world claimed it once more. They resolved to guard it, to protect it from those who would wield it for power or pride. But they also knew that its fate was woven into a tapestry greater than their own. The seasons turned, and J.R.R grew his spirit, a blend of mortal fire and elven grace. He was a child of two worlds, his mother's songs in his heart, his father's courage in his hands. Beren taught him the ways of the wild, the strength of a man who had faced the dark and lived. Lúthien taught him the music of the Eldar, the wisdom of a soul that had seen the birth of the world. Together they taught him love, the kind that burns through loss, and fear, the kind that carries a light against the night. J.R.'s laughter filled the glade, but his eyes held a knowing beyond his years. He would sit by the Silmaril, his small hands reaching for its light, his voice soft with questions. "Why does it shine, Ada?" he asked Beren one evening, the jewel's radiance casting shadows on his face. Beren knelt beside him, his maimed hand gentle on his son's shoulder. "It shines because it remembers," he said. "It remembers the light before the world, the hope that made it. And we carry it so that hope does not fade." Lúthien watched them, her heart swelling with a joy tinged with sorrow. Dior was their legacy, a spark of their love that would burn beyond their days. Yet she knew the world was vast and their time short. The Silmaril would pass to him, and with it the burden of its light. She sang to him at night, her voice a thread of starlight weaving spells of protection, of strength, of love that would linger when she was gone. But the world did not wait for their dreams. In the north, Morgoth's power grew, his armies spilling from Angband like a tide of shadow. In the east, the sons of Feanor gathered their oath, a chain that tightened with each passing day. In Doriath, the elves mourned Thingol and looked to the Silmaril as a symbol of their lost glory. The air was thick with whispers, with the scent of coming war, with the weight of a world that could not abide the light's presence. The first warning came in the form of a messenger, an elf of Doriath named Mablung, whose face was lined with grief and resolve. He came to Tol Galen under the cover of dusk, his cloak stained with the dust of a long journey. "The sons of Feanor have sent word," he said, his voice low. "They demand the Silmaril, claiming it as their right. They will not be stayed by words or honor." Beren stood, his maimed hand clenched, his eyes hard with a fire that had not dimmed. "They will not have it," he said, his voice steady. "Not while I breathe." Lúthien placed a hand on his arm, her gaze meeting Mablung's. "And Doriath?" she asked. "What does the kingdom say?" Mablung's answer was heavy with truth. "The kingdom is divided. Some see the Silmaril as a curse, others as a hope, but all fear the storm it will bring." The messenger left his steps, fading into the night, but his words lingered like a wound. Beren and Lúthien stood by the river, the Silmaril's light casting long shadows on the water. "We cannot stay here," Beren said, his voice a whisper. "The Silmaril will draw them to us, and Tol Galen will become a battlefield." Lúthien nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of leaving their home, their sanctuary. "Then we will go," she said. "We will carry the light as we always have." They prepared to leave, their movements swift but heavy with sorrow. Dior clung to Lúthien's hand, his eyes wide with a child's fear, but also with a strength that mirrored his parents'. Huan, ever loyal, stood guard, his fur silver in the starlight, his heart bound to theirs. The Silmaril was hidden in a pouch at Beren's side, its light muffled but unquenched, a star that burned against the dark. The journey from Tol Galen was a return to the wild, a path through forests and hills where the air was thick with the memory of war. They moved south toward the coasts of Beleriand, where the sea sang of freedom and sorrow. Beren's steps were steady, his maimed hand a constant ache, his heart driven by the need to protect his family, his light. Lúthien walked beside him, her song a shield, her love a flame that burned through the cold. Dior followed his small form, a spark of hope, his questions a reminder of why they fought. The world was alive with danger. Morgoth's spies roamed the wild, their eyes glinting in the dark, their whispers a chorus of malice. The sons of Feanor's scouts trailed them, their movements swift, their intent clear. Even the elves of Doriath, torn by grief and pride, sent watchers, their loyalty uncertain. Beren and Lúthien moved as shadows, their steps light, their voices hushed, but the Silmaril was a beacon, its light a call that could not be silenced. In the hills of arid Wethrin, where the stones were scarred by ancient battles, they were ambushed. Not by Morgoth's wolves or Feanor's sons, but by a band of men outcasts driven by desperation and greed. Their leader, a man with eyes like flint, brandished a spear, his voice sharp with hunger. "Give us the jewel," he demanded, "and you may live." Beren stood before Lúthien and Dior, his sword raised, his body a shield. "This light is not for you," he said, his voice steady despite the pain that burned in his hand. Lúthien sang, her voice a thread of power that wove a veil of fear, a spell that turned the men's hearts to doubt. Huan lunged, his growl a thunder that shook the earth, and the outcasts fled, their spears clattering to the ground. But the encounter left a mark. Dior clung to Lúthien, his small body trembling, his eyes wide with a fear he could not name. Beren knelt beside him, his maimed hand gentle on his son's shoulder. "Fear is a shadow," he said, "but we carry a light. Hold to it, and it will guide you." Dior nodded his small hand, finding the pouch where the Silmaril lay its warmth, a comfort against the cold. The coast of Beleriand was a place of wild beauty where the sea roared against cliffs of black stone, where the gulls cried like mourners for a world lost to shadow. Beren and Lúthien made camp in a cave above the tide, its walls carved by the sea's patient hand, its air thick with the scent of salt and sorrow. The Silmaril hung in the cave, its light a star that illuminated their faces, their fears, their fragile hopes. Here they spoke of the future of the world they would leave to Dior, of the light that would shine beyond their days. "The Silmaril is not ours," Beren said, his voice low, his eyes fixed on the jewel. "It belongs to the ages, to the hope that made it. We are its keepers, but we must let it go." Lúthien nodded, her hand resting on Dior's head, her heart heavy with the weight of truth. "It will pass to you," she said to her son, "and you will carry it as we have carried it. But you will not carry it alone." Dior listened, his small face solemn, his eyes bright with a fire that was both mortal and immortal. He was young, but he understood the weight of legacy, the truth that love is a burden as well as a gift. He took the Silmaril in his hands, its light warm against his skin, and vowed to guard it, to honor the love that had won it, to carry its hope into the world. But the world was not kind to bearers of light. In the night, as the sea sang its endless song, a new danger came. The sons of Feanor, driven by their oath, found them, their swords drawn, their eyes burning with a madness that had consumed their souls. Maedhros, their leader, stepped forward, his voice heavy with sorrow and resolve. "The Silmaril is ours," he said, "by the oath of our father, by the blood we have shed. Give it to us, and no more will die." Beren stood, his maimed hand empty, his heart steady. "This light was won by love," he said, "and it will not be taken by force." Lúthien stepped beside him, her song rising like a tide, a melody that wove a shield of power, a spell that turned the brothers' hearts to doubt. Huan guarded Dior, his growl a warning, his loyalty a light in the dark. The confrontation was a storm of steel and song of will and sorrow. Maedhros struck his sword, a flash of despair, but Beren met him, his blade a defiance that burned through pain. Lúthien's song was a fire, a force that bound the brothers, slowing their movements, dimming their rage. Huan leaped, his teeth bared, his strength a match for the oath's fury. The battle was brief, but brutal. Maedhros faltered, his heart torn by the weight of his oath, his love for his brothers warring with the madness that drove him. He called off the attack, his voice breaking, his eyes fixed on the Silmaril's light. "Keep it," he said, "but know that it will bring you ruin." The sons of Feanor retreated, their shadows fading into the night, their oath a chain that bound them to a fate they could not escape. The cave was silent, the sea's song a counterpoint to the grief that hung in the air. Beren was wounded, his body bleeding, his breath shallow. Lúthien knelt beside him, her song a plea, her tears falling like rain. Dior clung to her, his small hands clutching the Silmaril, his eyes wide with a fear he could not name. Huan lay at their feet, his fur matted with blood, his heart steady despite the pain. Beren took Lúthien's hand, his voice a whisper. "We have carried the light," he said, "and it will shine beyond us." Lúthien nodded, her heart breaking under the weight of love and loss. "It will shine," she said, "because we loved, because we chose." They did not return to Tol Galen. The Isle was a memory, a dream of peace that could not hold against the world's hunger. Instead, they moved north toward Doriath, toward the halls where the Silmaril had first been set, where its light had kindled both hope and ruin. Beren's wounds slowed him, his body frail, but his will was a fire that burned brighter than his pain. Lúthien supported him, her strength a miracle, her song a shield against the shadows that pursued them. Dior walked beside them, the Silmaril at his side, his small form a spark of hope in a world grown dark. In Doriath, the halls of Menegroth were a shadow of their former glory. Thingol's death had left a wound, a grief that lingered in the carven pillars in the eyes of the elves who guarded the kingdom. Melian the Maya, who had woven the girdle, had departed, her heart broken by the loss of her husband, her power fading into the mists. The kingdom was vulnerable. Its light dimmed, its hope tied to the Silmaril that Beren and Lúthien brought. They stood before the elves, the Silmaril raised in Dior's hands, its light a star that banished the shadows of Menegroth. "This is the light we won," Beren said, his voice steady despite the pain that burned in his body. "It is yours to guard, to cherish, to carry against the dark." Lúthien stepped beside him, her song a blessing, a melody that wove a thread of hope into the hearts of those who listened. The elves wept, their grief mingled with awe, their hearts stirred by the love that had brought the Silmaril to them. Dior, young but resolute, took his place as heir to Doriath, the Silmaril, his charge, his legacy, a light that would shine through the ages. Beren and Lúthien stepped back, their hands entwined, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that their time was near. In the glades of Neldoreth, where Lúthien had first danced, they made their final home. The beaches were silver in the starlight, the air thick with the scent of flowers, the memory of a love that had defied the world. Beren's body was failing his wounds, a fire that consumed him, but his eyes were bright, his love undimmed. Lúthien sat beside him, her song a lullaby, her hand in his, her heart bound to his. They spoke of their journey, of the darkness they had faced, of the light they had carried. "We did not triumph," Beren said, his voice a whisper. "We loved, and that was enough." Lúthien smiled, her tears falling like stars. "It was more than enough," she said. "It was everything." Their final days were a song, a melody of love and sorrow, of hope and loss. They watched the stars, their hands entwined their hearts, a single flame that burned against the night. When the end came, it was not a defeat, but a completion, a fading into the music that had shaped the world. The Silmaril passed to Dior, and from him to his daughter Elwing, a legacy of light that would shine through the ages. Beren and Lúthien's story became a song, a tale sung by the elves, a memory that lingered in the stars, in the rivers, in the hearts of those who heard it. To triumph over darkness is not to banish it, but to carry a light, to love fiercely, to choose hope, even when the world offers none. Beren and Lúthien chose, and in their choosing they wove a tale that would echo through the ages, a star that no shadow could extinguish, a love that no time could dim. In the glades of Neldoreth, where the silver beaches stood like sentinels of memory, Beren and Lúthien dwelt in their final days. The air was thick with the scent of moss and starlight, the world a tapestry of quiet beauty woven by the hands of time. Their bodies were frail, marked by the wounds of their journey, yet their spirits burned with a love that no shadow could dim. The Silmaril had passed to Dior, their son, now a young lord of Doriath, his heart alight with the fire of his parents' legacy. Beren and Lúthien were no longer its keepers, but its light lingered in their eyes, a star that shone through the veil of mortality. What is a life, if not a song? A melody that rises and falls, that weaves through joy and sorrow, that fades but leaves echoes in the hearts of those who hear it. Beren and Lúthien's song was one of love, of defiance, of a light carried through the darkest nights. They had faced Morgoth's throne, sung down towers, and chosen mortality over eternity, all for the sake of each other. Now, in the twilight of their days, they lived not for glory, but for the moments that made their love eternal, moments of laughter, of silence, of hands clasped beneath the stars. Yet the world beyond Neldoreth was not still. The Silmaril, now set in the halls of Menegroth, was a beacon that stirred the currents of fate. Its light was a hope, but also a wound, drawing the eyes of those bound to its radiance. The sons of Feanor, chained by their father's oath, felt its call, their souls tormented by the jewel they could not claim. Morgoth, in his iron fortress of Angband, nursed his malice, his mind fixed on the theft of his crown's glory. The elves of Doriath, led by Dior, guarded the Silmaril with a fierce pride, yet their kingdom was fragile, its strength diminished by the loss of Thingol and Melion's departure. The world was vast, and Beren and Lúthien were mortal, but they felt the weight of these shadows like a wind that carries the scent of a coming storm. In their glade they spoke of the Silmaril of Dior, of the legacy they had woven. "He is strong," Beren said, his voice soft, his maimed hand tracing the bark of a beech. "But the Silmaril is a burden no one can bear alone." Lúthien nodded, her eyes tracing the stars through the canopy, her heart heavy with a mother's love and fear. "He carries our light," she said, "and our love. It will guide him even when we cannot." Their words were not a farewell, but a prayer, a hope that their son would find his own path, that the light they had won would shine beyond their days. They knew their time was short, their bodies fading like leaves in autumn, but they did not fear. To choose mortality was to choose life, to embrace each moment as a gift, to sing their song until the final note. The days in Neldoreth were a quiet hymn, each one a verse in the song of their love. Beren worked the land, his maimed hand slow but steady, his laughter a sound that warmed the glade. He carved small figures from wood, a hound for Huan, a star for Lúthien, a sword for Dior, his fingers tracing memories into the grain. Lúthien danced as she had in her youth, her feet light on the grass, her hair a cascade of midnight woven with silver. Her immortality was gone, but her beauty was a flame kindled not by her lineage, but by the truth she carried in her heart. They sat by the river as Gulduin, its waters reflecting the stars like a mirror of the heavens. Beren's head rested against Lúthien's shoulder, his breath soft, his eyes tracing the patterns of light on the water. "I wonder," he said, his voice a whisper, "if the stars remember us, if they see the light we carried, the love we chose." Lúthien smiled, her hand finding his, her voice a melody that mingled with the river's song. "They remember," she said. "They sing of it in a language older than the world, and they will sing of us long after we are gone." Their words were a comfort, but also a truth. Their love was a star, a light that had burned through the darkness of Angband, through the pain of loss, through the weight of mortality. It was a light that would linger not in the Silmaril alone, but in the hearts of those who heard their tale, in the songs of the Eldar, in the dreams of men. Yet even in their peace, the world's unrest crept closer. Messengers came from Doriath, their faces lined with worry, their voices low with warning. "The sons of Feanor grow bold," one said, his eyes fixed on the ground. "They send letters demanding the Silmaril, threatening war if it is not yielded." Another spoke of Morgoth's spies of shadows moving in the north of a darkness that gathered like a storm. J.R.R, young but resolute, held the kingdom with a steady hand, but the weight of the Silmaril was a chain binding him to a fate he could not escape. Beren and Lúthien listened, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that their son stood at the heart of this storm. They did not speak of returning to Doriath, for their place was here in the glade where their love had taken root. But they sent words to J.R.R carried by the messengers, words of love and strength of a light that could not be quenched. "Hold to hope," Beren wrote, his hand trembling on the parchment. "It is the only shield against the dark." Lúthien added her own, her script flowing like a song. "You are our light, our song. Sing it, and the world will hear." The seasons turned, and the glade of Neldoreth became a place of farewell. Beren's strength waned, his body a shadow of the man who had faced Morgoth's throne. His maimed hand ached in the cold, his breath came in shallow gasps, but his eyes were bright, his love a fire that burned through pain. Lúthien cared for him, her hands gentle, her song a lullaby that eased his rest. She sang of their journey of the glades where they had danced, of the Silmaril's light, of a love that had moved the heart of Mandos. Juan the Hound of Valinor lay at their feet, his fur silvered with age, his eyes soft with a loyalty that had never faltered. He had fought wolves and balrogs, guarded their path through the wild, and stood with them against the sons of Feanor. Now he rested his great head on his paws, his heart bound to theirs. Beren's hand rested on his fur, a silent thanks for a friend who had shared their burden, their light. In the quiet of their days, they spoke of the world they would leave, of the legacy they had woven. "J.R.R will carry the Silmaril," Beren said, his voice a whisper, his eyes fixed on the stars. "But he will carry our love too, and that is the greater light." Lúthien nodded, her tears falling like stars, her hand in his. "He will sing our song," she said, "and it will echo through him, through his children, through the ages yet to come." Their words were a hope, but also a truth. Their love was not bound to their bodies, to their days, to the Silmaril's light. It was a song, a melody that would linger in the world, in the hearts of those who heard it, in the stars that sang above. They had triumphed not by banishing darkness, but by carrying a light, by choosing love, by weaving a tale that no shadow could silence. The end came softly, like a song fading into memory. Beren lay in their bower, his breath a faint rhythm, his eyes fixed on Lúthien's face. She sat beside him, her hand in his, her song a whisper that carried him gently into the dark. "Tinuviel," he said, his voice a breath, his love, a star that burned through the veil of death. Lúthien smiled, her tears falling, her heart breaking and whole. "I am here," she said. "I will always be here." He passed his body still, his spirit a light that joined the stars. Lúthien sat with him, her song a lament that echoed through the glade, a melody that reached beyond the world. She did not linger long. Her heart bound to his could not bear the emptiness of his absence. She lay beside him, her hand in his, her breath fading her song, a final note that mingled with the river's music. And lay at their feet, his great head bowed, his heart heavy with grief. He did not leave them, his loyalty a light that burned through sorrow. The glade was silent, the stars bright above the world holding its breath for a love that had changed its course. The news of their passing reached Doriath like a wave, a sorrow that broke the hearts of the elves. Eärendil stood in the halls of Menegroth, the Silmaril in his hands, its light a star that illuminated his grief. He was young, but he was their son, his spirit woven with their courage, their love, their light. He vowed to guard the Silmaril, to honor the legacy of his parents, to carry their song into the world. But the world was not kind to bearers of light. The sons of Feanor, driven by their oath, came to Doriath, their swords drawn, their eyes burning with a madness that had consumed their souls. They demanded the Silmaril, their voices sharp with the weight of their vow. Eärendil stood before them, his hand on the jewel, his heart steady with the fire of his parents' love. "This light was won by my mother and father," he said. "It will not be taken by force." The battle that followed was a storm of steel and sorrow, a clash that stained the halls of Menegroth with blood. Eärendil fought with the strength of Beren, his sword, a flash of defiance, his heart alight with Lúthien's song. But the sons of Feanor were relentless, their oath a chain that drove them to ruin. Eärendil fell, his body broken. The Silmaril clutched in his hand, its light a star that burned through the dark. The Silmaril passed to Elwing, Eärendil's daughter, a child of mortal and immortal, her heart a spark of her grandparents' love. She fled Doriath, the jewel at her side, her path a journey through a world torn by war and betrayal. The sons of Feanor pursued her, their oath, a curse that would not release them, their souls bound to a light they could not claim. In the glades of Neldoreth, the beeches stood silent, their branches heavy with the memory of Beren and Lúthien. The river Esgalduin sang on its waters, carrying their song, their love, their light. The elves came to the glade, their voices soft with reverence, their hearts stirred by a tale that had become a legend. They sang of Beren, the mortal who had faced Morgoth's throne, of Lúthien, the elven maid, whose song had moved the heart of doom, of a love that had defied the world and won. Their story was a song, a melody that echoed through the ages, a light that shone in the hearts of those who heard it. It was not a triumph of swords or crowns, but of the soul that chooses to love, to hope, to carry a light against the dark. Beren and Lúthien had faced fear-born burdens, defied temptation, and chosen faith not for glory, but for each other, for the truth they had glimpsed in a glade beneath the stars. The Silmaril carried by Elwing would shine on its light, a thread in the tapestry of the world's fate. It would rise as a star, Eärendil's beacon, a hope for a world weary with shadow. But its true light was not in its radiance, but in the love that had won it, the love that had carried it, the love that had sung it into being. To triumph over darkness is not to banish it, for darkness is eternal, as old as the void before the world was made. It is to carry a light, however small, and to hold it high even when the wind howls and the shadows close in. Beren and Lúthien carried such a light not because they were strong, but because they were faithful, faithful to each other, to the hope they had kindled, to the song that had woven their souls together. Their tale was not finished, for no true tale ever is. It lingered in the songs of the Eldar, in the dreams of men in the stars that burned above. It lingered in Elwing and the child she would bear, in the hope that would sail across the sea to the shores of Valinor. It lingered in the world, a melody that sang of love, of loss, of a light that no darkness could quench. In the silence of Neldoreth, where the beeches stood and the river sang their song, faded, but it did not end. It was a star, a light, a love that would shine through the ages, a truth that no shadow could silence. Beren and Lúthien had chosen, and in their choosing they had woven a tale that would echo forever, a song that would never fade. The glades of Neldoreth, where Beren and Lúthien had breathed their last, stood silent, their silver beaches bearing witness to a love that had reshaped the world. The river Esgalduin sang on its waters, carrying the echo of their song, a melody woven with joy, sorrow, and undying hope. Their bodies were gone, their mortal lives a flame that had burned bright and faded, but their legacy was a star, its light carried forward by their son Eärendil, and now by his daughter Elwing, a child of mortal and immortal blood. The Silmaril, that jewel of creation's dawn, was hers to bear a radiant burden that tied her to the fate of her grandparents, to the love that had defied gods and darkness. What is a legacy if not a thread in the tapestry of time? For Beren and Lúthien, their legacy was not the Silmaril alone, but the love that had won it, the courage that had carried it, the hope that had sung it into being. Their story was a song, its notes lingering in the hearts of the elves, in the dreams of men, in the stars that burned above. Yet the world they had left was a world of shadow, where the Silmaril's light was both a beacon and a wound, stirring the hearts of those bound to its radiance. Elwing, young and frail, carried this light through a land torn by war and betrayal, her small hands clutching a jewel that had shaken the foundations of Middle-earth. The sons of Feanor, chained by their father's oath, pursued her, their souls consumed by the need to reclaim the Silmaril. Morgoth, in his iron fortress of Angband, felt its absence, his malice a tide that sought to drown the world. The elves of Doriath, their kingdom shattered by the kinslaying that had claimed Dior, were scattered, their hope tied to a child who bore the light of Beren and Lúthien's love. The world was vast and Elwing was small, but she was not alone, not yet. Elwing fled Doriath with a remnant of her people, the Silmaril hidden beneath her cloak, its light a warmth against her heart. She was a child no more than 7 winters old, yet her eyes held a fire that was both mortal and immortal, a spark of her grandparents' courage. Her guardians, led by the elf lord Galadhon, guided her south toward the havens of Sirion, where the sea met the land in a song of salt and sorrow. The journey was perilous, the wilds of Beleriand alive with Morgoth's spies and the sons of Feanor's scouts. Every shadow held a threat, every wind a whisper of pursuit. In the forests of Non-Tathrin, where the willows wept over the river, Narog Elwing paused, her small form trembling with exhaustion. The Silmaril's light cast patterns on the ground, a dance of radiance and shadow that seemed to sing of her grandparents' tale. She clutched it tightly, her fingers tracing its warmth, her heart heavy with a burden she could not fully understand. "Why does it shine?" she asked Galadhon. Her voice soft, her eyes wide with a child's wonder. The elf lord knelt beside her, his face lined with grief, his voice steady with truth. "It shines because of love," he said. "Your grandparents, Beren and Lúthien, won it with their hearts, their courage, their song. You carry their light, Elwing, and it will guide you." His words were a comfort, but also a weight. Elwing nodded, her small hand tightening on the Silmaril, her resolve a flame kindled by the memory of a love she had never known. She was their heir, their legacy, a child who bore the hope of a world grown weary with shadow. The journey continued through valleys scarred by war, over hills where the wind carried the cries of the fallen. The Silmaril was her shield, its light a veil that hid her from the eyes of Morgoth's spies, but it was also a beacon, a call that drew the sons of Feanor ever closer. The havens of Sirion were a refuge, a cluster of white towers and wooden halls where the river met the sea. Here the remnants of Doriath and Gondolin dwelt, their hearts heavy with loss, their hope tied to the Silmaril that Elwing bore. She was welcomed as a queen, though she was but a child, her presence a spark that kindled memories of Lúthien's grace, of Beren's defiance. The Silmaril was set in a tower above the sea, its light a star that shone over the waves, a beacon that called to the hearts of the weary. Elwing grew in the havens, her childhood a blend of joy and sorrow. She ran through the dunes, her laughter mingling with the gulls' cries, her hair a cascade of midnight like her grandmother's. She listened to the tales of her people, of Beren who had faced Morgoth's throne, of Lúthien who had sung down towers of a love that had moved the heart of Mandos. The Silmaril was her companion, its light a warmth that eased her fears, a reminder that she was not alone. Yet the shadow of the Silmaril's light was ever present. The sons of Feanor sent messengers to the havens, their words sharp with the weight of their oath. "The Silmaril is ours," they declared, "by the blood of our father, by the vow that binds us. Yield it or face our wrath." Elwing, though young, stood before them, her small form steady, her voice clear with the fire of her grandparents' love. "This light was won by my kin," she said, "and it will not be taken by force." Her words were a defiance, but they were also a wound. The sons of Feanor did not relent their oath, a chain that tightened with each passing day. The havens prepared for war, their walls fortified, their spears sharpened, but the air was thick with fear, with the knowledge that the Silmaril's light would bring ruin as surely as it brought hope. Elwing felt this weight, her heart torn between the love that had won the jewel and the sorrow it kindled. In the quiet of her tower she sat with the Silmaril, its light casting shadows on the walls, its warmth a comfort against the cold. "What am I to do?" she whispered, not to the jewel, but to the memory of Beren and Lúthien, to the love that had carried them through the dark. The Silmaril did not answer, but its light seemed to pulse a rhythm that echoed her grandparents' song, a reminder that love, though it may break the heart, is the only force that can mend it. The storm broke in the dead of winter when the sea roared against the cliffs and the stars were veiled by clouds. The sons of Feanor came to the havens, their swords drawn, their eyes burning with a madness that had consumed their souls. Maedhros led them, his heart heavy with sorrow, his will bound to the oath that had cursed his house. The battle was a tempest of steel and fire, a clash that stained the sands with blood that shattered the white towers of Sirion. Elwing stood in her tower. The Silmaril clutched to her chest, her heart pounding with a fear she could not name. The cries of her people filled the air, the clash of swords a counterpoint to the sea's roar. She was a child, but she was Beren's heir, Lúthien's legacy, and she would not yield. As the sons of Feanor breached the walls, she fled her small form, a shadow against the flames, her path leading to the cliffs above the sea. The Silmaril burned in her hands, its light a star that pierced the dark, a beacon that called to the heart of the world. Maedhros pursued her, his sword red with blood, his eyes fixed on the jewel that had driven him to ruin. "Give it to me," he cried, his voice breaking, his heart torn by the oath that bound him. Elwing turned her face pale, her eyes fierce with the fire of her grandparents' love. "This light is not yours," she said, "and it never will be." With a cry, she leaped from the cliff, her body falling toward the sea, the Silmaril blazing in her hands. The waves rose to meet her, not with cold, but with a warmth that was both strange and familiar. Ulmo the Vala of the waters had heard her cry, had seen the light of Beren and Lúthien's love, and he would not let it fall. He bore her up, her form, changing her arms, becoming wings, her body a white gull that soared above the waves. The Silmaril hung about her neck, a star that shone over the sea, a light that no darkness could quench. The sons of Feanor stood on the cliffs, their swords heavy in their hands, their hearts broken by the loss of the Silmaril. Maedhros wept his tears mingling with the sea's spray, his oath a chain that would not release him. The havens of Sirion burned, their people scattered, their hope carried away on the wings of a gull. The Silmaril was gone, but its light lingered, a star that shone in the west, a beacon that called to the hearts of the weary. Elwing flew her wings strong, her heart alight with the fire of her grandparents' love. She was no longer a child, but a bearer of light, a legacy of courage and hope. Her path led her across the sea toward the shores of Valinor, where the Valar dwelt in their halls of light. The Silmaril was her guide, its radiance a song that echoed Beren and Lúthien's tale, a melody that reached beyond the world. In the havens of Alqualanda she found Eärendil, her beloved, a mariner whose heart was tied to the sea, whose dreams were of a world made whole. He was a child of men and elves like her, his spirit woven with the courage of his father Tuor and the wisdom of his mother Eärendil. Together they stood on the shores of Valinor, the Silmaril raised between them, its light a star that pierced the veil of the world. Eärendil took the Silmaril, his hands steady, his heart alight with a hope that was both mortal and immortal. He set it upon his ship, Vingelot, its radiance a beacon that guided him through the mists of the sea, through the shadows that guarded Valinor. The Valar saw the light, heard the song of Beren and Lúthien's love, and their hearts were stirred. They granted Eärendil passage, his ship rising into the heavens, the Silmaril a star that shone for all the world to see. The star of Eärendil was a hope, a light that burned against the darkness of Morgoth's reign. It shone over Middle-earth, a reminder of the love that had won it, of the courage that had carried it, of the song that had sung it into being. The elves saw it and sang their voices, weaving a tale of Beren and Lúthien, of a love that had defied the world and won. Men saw it and dreamed, their hearts stirred by a hope that could not be quenched. Even Morgoth in his iron fortress felt its light, a wound that pierced his malice, a reminder that his dominion was not absolute. Elwing and Eärendil dwelt in Valinor, their hearts bound to the star that shone above, to the legacy of Beren and Lúthien that had carried them there. They were mortal and immortal, their lives a bridge between worlds, their love a song that echoed their grandparents' tale. The Silmaril was no longer theirs to hold, but its light was theirs to cherish, a star that would shine through the ages, a hope for a world weary with shadow. In Middle-earth, the war against Morgoth grew, the hosts of the Valar gathering in the west, their banners bright with the light of Eärendil's star. The Silmaril was a call, a spark that kindled the hearts of the weary, a reminder that love, however fragile, could triumph over darkness. The sons of Feanor, their oath unfulfilled, wandered the wilds, their souls broken by the light they could not claim. The world was vast, and the war was long, but the star shone on a testament to a love that had changed its course. In the glades of Neldoreth, where Beren and Lúthien had lived and loved the beaches, stood silent, their branches heavy with memory. The river Esgalduin sang on its waters, carrying their song, a melody that reached beyond the world. The elves came to the glade, their voices soft with reverence, their hearts stirred by a tale that had become a legend. They sang of Beren the mortal who had faced Morgoth's throne, of Lúthien the elven maid, whose song had moved the heart of doom, of a love that had defied the world and won. Their story was a song, a melody that echoed through the ages, a light that shone in the hearts of those who heard it. It was not a triumph of swords or crowns, but of the soul that chooses to love, to hope to carry a light against the dark. Beren and Lúthien had faced fear-born burdens, defied temptation, and chosen faith not for glory, but for each other, for the truth they had glimpsed in a glade beneath the stars. The star of Eärendil was their legacy, a light that shone for all the world, a hope that no darkness could quench. It was a reminder that love is a force stronger than death, stronger than despair, stronger than the malice of gods. It was a reminder that to triumph over darkness is not to banish it, but to carry a light, to love fiercely, to choose hope, even when the world offers none. The world turned, and the war against Morgoth reached its climax. The hosts of the Valor marched, their banners bright with the light of Eärendil's star, their hearts alight with the song of Beren and Lúthien's love. The earth shook, the skies burned, and Angband fell, its iron gates shattered, its darkness broken. Morgoth was cast into the void, his malice a shadow that could no longer hold the world. The Silmarils were lost, two to the earth and sea, one to the heavens, their light a mystery that would linger through the ages. But the star of Eärendil shone on a beacon that guided the hearts of the weary, a testament to a love that had changed the world. Elwing and Eärendil, their lives bound to its light, dwelt in Valinor, their hearts a song that echoed their grandparents' tale. In Middle-earth the elves sang of Beren and Lúthien, their voices weaving a tale that would never fade. Men told their story, their dreams stirred by a hope that could not be quenched. The star shone above a light that carried their love, their courage, their song. It was a star that no shadow could extinguish, a melody that no silence could break, a truth that no time could dim. To triumph over darkness is to carry a light, to love fiercely, to choose hope, even when the world offers none. Beren and Lúthien chose, and in their choosing they wove a tale that would echo through the ages, a song that would never fade, a star that would shine forever. The star of Eärendil hung in the heavens, a beacon of light that pierced the shadows of Middle-earth, its radiance a testament to the love of Beren and Lúthien. The Silmaril, once torn from Morgoth's crown, now shone as a celestial guide carried aloft by Eärendil's ship Vingilot, a vessel of hope sailing the skies. Elwing, transformed into a white gull, soared beside him, her heart bound to the light that her grandparents had won, her wings a symbol of the sacrifice that had lifted their legacy beyond the circles of the world. Yet the world below was a tapestry of strife, its threads woven with the echoes of their tale, its heart stirred by the light that refused to fade. What is hope if not a tide that carries the soul forward? For Beren and Lúthien, hope was not a promise of victory, but a choice to love, to endure, to carry a light through the darkest nights. Their story had become a song sung by the elves in their halls, whispered by men in their camps, carried by the winds that swept across Beleriand. The star above was their legacy, a spark of their love that burned for all to see, a reminder that even in a world of shadow, a single light could change the course of fate. But the tide of hope is not gentle. It surges, it breaks, it demands that those who follow its call bear its weight. In the havens of Valinor, where the Valar dwelt in their halls of light, Eärendil and Elwing stood before the powers of the West. The Silmaril blazed upon Vingilot's prow, its light a song that echoed Beren and Lúthien's defiance, their love, their choice to face the dark. The Valar, stern and radiant, listened as Eärendil spoke, his voice steady with the fire of his mortal heart tempered by the wisdom of his elven blood. He pleaded for the peoples of Middle-earth, for the elves and men who languished under Morgoth's shadow, for a world that could still be made whole. The Valar were moved not by the Silmaril alone, but by the love that had won it, the courage that had carried it, the song that had sung it into the heavens. They saw in Eärendil and Elwing the echo of Beren and Lúthien, a love that had defied the laws of creation, a hope that had pierced the heart of doom. They granted Eärendil's plea, their will a tide that would sweep across the sea, a host of light to challenge the darkness of Angband. But they also granted Eärendil and Elwing a choice, as they had granted Lúthien, to live as mortals their days numbered, or as immortals bound to the fate of the Eldar. Eärendil chose for Elwing and Elwing for herself, their hearts aligned with the love that had carried them to Valinor. They chose immortality not for eternity's sake, but to bear the Silmaril forever, to be its keepers in the heavens, to shine as a star for a world that needed hope. Vingelo rose its sails, catching the winds of the sky, the Silmaril a light that burned against the night, a star that would guide the hearts of the weary through the ages. In Middle-earth, the star of Eärendil was a wonder, a light that stirred the souls of those who gazed upon it. The elves of Beleriand, scattered and weary, saw it and sang their voices, weaving a tale of Beren and Lúthien, of a love that had defied Morgoth's throne, of a light that had become a star. Men their lives brief but fierce saw it and dreamed, their hearts kindled with a hope that could not be quenched. Even the orc slaves to Morgoth's will felt its light, a wound that pierced their master's dominion, a reminder that his power was not absolute. But the world was still a place of shadow. Morgoth's armies roamed the wilds, their iron boots crushing the earth, their fires blackening the sky. The sons of Feanor, their oath unfulfilled, wandered the east, their souls broken by the Silmaril they could not claim. The remnants of Doriath and Gondolin dwelt in hidden places, their hope tied to the star above their hearts, heavy with the weight of loss. The tide of hope was rising, but it was not yet a flood, and the world trembled on the edge of ruin. In the hidden valleys of Osiriand, where the rivers ran swift and the trees whispered of ancient sorrows, a remnant of the elves gathered their leader, a warrior named Celeborn, his heart bound to the memory of Doriath's glory. They spoke of the star of the Silmaril that had been won by Beren and Lúthien, of the love that had carried it to the heavens. "It is a sign," Celeborn said, his voice steady, his eyes fixed on the light above, "a sign that the Valar have not forgotten us, that the light of love can still prevail." His words were a spark, a flame that kindled the hearts of his people. They sent messengers to the west, to the hidden havens where the Teleri dwelt, to the mountains where the dwarves of Belegost forged their steel. They called for a gathering, a union of the free peoples, a stand against the darkness that sought to drown the world. The star of Eärendil was their banner, its light a call to arms, a reminder that the love of Beren and Lúthien had changed the world and could change it again. The War of Wrath, as it would be called, was a tide that broke upon Middle-earth like a storm. The hosts of the Valar came from the west, their banners bright with the light of Eärendil's star, their swords gleaming with the fire of creation. Tulkas the warrior, Vala led them, his laughter a thunder that shook the earth, his strength a match for Morgoth's malice. Orome rode beside him, his horn a call that rallied the hearts of the weary, his spear a flash of light against the dark. The eagles of Manwë soared above their wings, a shadow that guarded the hosts, their cries a song that echoed the music of Ilúvatar. The elves and men of Middle-earth joined them, their hearts alight with the star's promise, their swords raised in defiance of the dark. Celeborn fought with the grace of the Sindar, his blade a dance that honored Lúthien's song. The men of the Edain, descendants of Beren's kin, fought with a fire that burned through fear, their voices shouting the name of the star that guided them. The dwarves of Belegost, their axes heavy, their hearts steadfast, carved a path through Morgoth's hordes, their craft a testament to the light they defended. The earth shook, the skies burned, and Angband's gates were shattered. Morgoth's armies, vast and terrible, poured forth orcs in their thousands, Balrogs with whips of flame dragons whose breath was a furnace of death. But the hosts of the Valar were a tide that could not be stemmed, their light a force that broke the darkness. Eärendil fought in the skies, Vingelo, a comet that blazed through the clouds, the Silmaril, a star that pierced the hearts of Morgoth's creatures. Elwing soared beside him, her wings a flash of white, her heart a song that echoed her grandparents' love. The war was long, its cost written in blood and ruin. Mountains fell, rivers burned, and the land of Beleriand was broken, its beauty drowned beneath the waves. Yet the star of Eärendil shone on a light that guided the hosts, a hope that could not be quenched. Morgoth, vast and terrible, stood in his deepest halls, his crown empty, his malice a shadow that sought to drown the world. But the Valar were relentless, their will a fire that burned through his defenses, their light a truth that he could not deny. Tulkas seized him, his hands a vice that broke Morgoth's strength. The Silmarils, too, still bound to his crown, were torn free, their light a wound that pierced his soul. He was bound in chains forged by Aule, his power broken, his malice cast into the void beyond the world. The War of Wrath was won, but its victory was a sorrow, for Beleriand was lost. Its people scattered, its songs drowned beneath the sea. The Silmarils were a mystery, their fate a thread that wove through the ages. One shone in the heavens, carried by Eärendil, a star that guided the hearts of the weary. The others were lost, one to the earth, one to the sea, their light a secret kept by the world. Yet their radiance lingered, a memory of Beren and Lúthien's love, a hope that burned through the darkness of the ages. In Valinor, Eärendil and Elwing dwelt their hearts bound to the star that shone above their lives, a song that echoed their grandparents' tale. They were the keepers of the Silmaril, its light a testament to the love that had won it, the courage that had carried it, the hope that had sung it into the heavens. They watched the world, their eyes soft with sorrow and joy, their hearts alight with the fire of Beren and Lúthien's legacy. In Middle-earth, the elves sang of their tale, their voices weaving a song that would never fade. The men of the Edain, their lives brief but fierce, told their story, their dreams stirred by a hope that could not be quenched. The star of Eärendil shone above a light that carried their love, their courage, their song. It was a star that no shadow could extinguish, a melody that no silence could break, a truth that no time could dim. The sons of Feanor, their oath unfulfilled, wandered the wilds, their souls broken by the Silmarils they could not claim. Maedhros and Maglor, the last of their house, stood by the sea, their hands stained with blood, their hearts heavy with sorrow. The Silmarils, one in the earth, one in the sea, burned their hands when they sought to claim them, their light, a judgment that they could not bear. Maedhros cast himself into a chasm of fire, his soul consumed by the oath that had cursed him. Maglor wandered the shores, his voice a lament that mingled with the waves, his heart a song that would never find rest. The world turned and the ages passed. The star of Eärendil shone on a beacon that guided the hearts of the weary, a testament to a love that had changed the world. The elves dwindled their songs, fading into the west, their hearts bound to the light that had been won by Beren and Lúthien. Men rose, their lives brief but fierce, their dreams stirred by a hope that carried the echo of their tale. In the glades of Neldoreth, now lost beneath the sea, the memory of Beren and Lúthien lingered, a song that sang in the waves, in the stars, in the hearts of those who heard it. The river Esgalduin was gone, but its music lived on a melody that carried their love, their courage, their hope. The elves who sailed to Valinor sang of them, their voices weaving a tale that would never fade. The men who built new kingdoms told their story, their dreams stirred by a light that could not be quenched. The star of Eärendil was their legacy, a light that shone for all the world, a hope that no darkness could dim. It was a reminder that love is a force stronger than death, stronger than despair, stronger than the malice of gods. It was a reminder that to triumph over darkness is not to banish it, but to carry a light, to love fiercely, to choose hope, even when the world offers none. In the halls of Valinor, Eärendil and Elwing stood, their hands entwined, their eyes fixed on the star that shone above. They saw the world, its joys and sorrows, its hopes and fears, its lights and shadows. They saw the echo of Beren and Lúthien's love, a song that sang through the ages, a light that burned in the hearts of those who carried it. They were the keepers of the Silmaril, but they were also its heirs, their lives a testament to the love that had won it, the courage that had carried it, the hope that had sung it into the heavens. The world was vast, and they were small, but they were not alone. The star shone for all, a light that carried the song of Beren and Lúthien, a melody that reached beyond the circles of the world. It was a song of fear faced, burdens borne, temptations defied, and faith chosen. It was a song of love, of a man and a maid who had walked through the dark hand in hand and emerged with a light that would shine forever. The tide of hope had carried them, and it carried on a force that swept through the ages, a light that burned in the hearts of those who saw the star. The world changed, its lands reshaped, its peoples scattered, but the star remained a beacon that guided the weary, a testament to a love that had defied the world and won. To triumph over darkness is to carry a light, to love fiercely, to choose hope even when the world offers none. Beren and Lúthien chose, and in their choosing they wove a tale that would echo through the ages, a song that would never fade, a star that would shine forever. Their love was a tide, a force that carried their light from the glades of Neldoreth to the halls of Mandos, from the throne of Morgoth to the heavens above. It was a tide that carried Elwing and Eärendil, that carried the hosts of the Valar, that carried the hope of a world made whole. Their story was not finished, for no true story ever is. It lingered in the songs of the elves, in the dreams of men in the stars that burned above. It lingered in the light of Eärendil's star, a beacon that shone for all the world, a hope that no darkness could quench. It lingered in the world, a melody that sang of love, of loss, of a light that no shadow could silence. In the silence of the heavens where Vingelot sailed and the Silmaril shone, the song of Beren and Lúthien lived on a melody that reached beyond the world, a light that burned through the ages, a love that no time could dim. They had triumphed not by banishing darkness, but by carrying a light, by choosing love, by weaving a tale that would shine forever, a star that no shadow could extinguish. The star of Eärendil burned in the heavens, a radiant testament to the love of Beren and Lúthien, its light a thread that wove through the tapestry of the world's ages. Carried aloft by Vingelot, the Silmaril shone as a beacon of hope, a star born from the courage of a mortal man and an elven maid who had defied the darkness of Morgoth's throne. Elwing, her wings white as sea foam, soared beside her husband, her heart bound to the light that her grandparents had won, her spirit a spark of their undying song. Below Middle-earth lay changed its lands, reshaped by the war of wrath, its heart stirred by the echoes of a tale that refused to fade. What is memory, if not a light that lingers? For Beren and Lúthien, their memory was a song, its notes carried in the winds that swept across the sea, in the songs of the elves, in the dreams of men. Their love had been a tide sweeping through fear, burden, and loss, carrying a light that had pierced the heart of darkness. The star above was their legacy, a spark of their hope that burned for all to see, a reminder that even in a world of shadow, a single act of love could echo through eternity. Yet memory is not a gentle thing. It demands that those who hold it bear its weight, that they sing its truth, that they carry its light forward into the unknown. In Valinor, where the valor dwelt in their halls of radiance, Eärendil and Elwing lived as keepers of the Silmaril, their lives a bridge between the mortal and the immortal. The star they bore was a symbol not of victory alone, but of the love that had won it, the courage that had carried it, the song that had sung it into the heavens. They stood upon the shores of the blessed realm, their eyes fixed on the light that burned above their hearts, heavy with the memory of Beren and Lúthien's sacrifice. The valor in their wisdom had seen the truth of their tale, had felt the power of their love, and had granted the star its place in the sky, a hope for a world weary with shadow. Yet the world below was not still. The war of wrath had broken Morgoth's dominion, casting him into the void, but its cost was a wound that scarred the earth. Beleriand was lost, its forests and rivers drowned beneath the sea, its people scattered to new lands. The elves, their numbers dwindling, sailed west to Valinor, their songs fading into the mists. Men, their lives brief but fierce, rose in the east, their hearts kindled by the star's light, their dreams stirred by a tale they could not fully grasp. The Silmaril was a star, but its memory was a fire burning in the hearts of those who carried its story, a light that no darkness could quench. In the new lands of Middle-earth, where the mountains stood tall and the rivers ran free, the elves gathered in hidden realms, their hearts bound to the memory of Beren and Lúthien. In Lindon, where the sea met the shore, Gil-galad, the high king of the Noldor, ruled with a wisdom tempered by sorrow. He had seen the star rise, had felt its light, had heard the songs that told of a mortal man and an elven maid who had changed the world. "Their love is our hope," he said, his voice steady, his eyes fixed on the heavens. "It is a light we must carry, a song we must sing, for as long as the world endures." His words were a call, a vow to honor the memory of Beren and Lúthien, to weave their tale into the fabric of the elves' legacy. The bards of Lindon sang of them, their voices rising like a tide, their harps weaving a melody that echoed the glades of Neldoreth, the halls of Menegroth, the throne of Morgoth. They sang of Beren, who had faced fear with a mortal heart, of Lúthien, whose song had moved the heart of doom, of a love that had defied the world and won. The elves listened, their hearts stirred, their hope kindled by a light that burned through the ages. Men, too, carried the memory, though their tales were rougher, their songs less polished. In the camps of the Edain descendants of Beren's kin, the story of the star was told around fires, its light a spark in the eyes of those who listened. They spoke of a man like themselves, a wanderer who had faced a god and lived of a love that had carried him through the dark. "He was one of us," they said, their voices fierce with pride, "and his light shines for us still." The star of Eärendil was a bridge, a light that bound the elves and men, a memory that wove their fates together. It was a reminder that love is a force stronger than death, stronger than despair, stronger than the malice of gods. It was a reminder that to triumph over darkness is not to banish it, but to carry a light, to love fiercely, to choose hope, even when the world offers none. In the hidden realm of Imladris, where the rivers sang and the trees whispered of ancient truths, Elrond, son of Eärendil and Elwing, grew in wisdom and strength. He was a child of mortal and immortal blood, his heart bound to the star that shone above, his spirit woven with the memory of his great-grandparents' love. He had never known Beren and Lúthien, but their tale was his inheritance, a song that sang in his blood, a light that guided his path. Elrond stood in the halls of Imladris, his eyes fixed on the star, his heart heavy with the weight of memory. He was a healer, a lore master, a leader of his people, but he was also a bearer of hope, a keeper of the light that Beren and Lúthien had won. He gathered the tales of their journey, their love, their sacrifice, preserving them in scrolls and songs, ensuring that their memory would endure. "Their light is our guide," he said, his voice soft but resolute. "Their love is our strength. We carry it as they carried it through the darkness of the world." His words were a vow, a promise to honor the legacy of Beren and Lúthien, to weave their tale into the history of Middle-earth. The elves of Imladris sang of them, their voices a melody that echoed through the valley, their hearts alight with the fire of a love that had changed the world. Men came to Imladris seeking wisdom, seeking hope, and they heard the tale, their dreams stirred by a light that burned through the ages. But the world was not free of shadow. Sauron, Morgoth's lieutenant, had survived the War of Wrath, his malice a seed that grew in the east. He was a shadow of his master, but no less deadly, his will bent on dominion, his heart fixed on the light that had defied him. He knew the tale of Beren and Lúthien, had felt the power of their love when Lúthien's song had broken his tower, and he hated it. The star of Eärendil was a wound to him, a reminder that his power was not absolute, that a mortal man and an elven maid had triumphed where he had failed. Sauron's shadow grew, his armies gathering in the land of Mordor, his rings of power, a chain that sought to bind the free peoples. The elves of Lindon and Imladris felt his presence, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that the light of Beren and Lúthien's love would be tested again. Men, their lives brief but fierce, stood against him, their swords raised in defiance, their hope tied to the star that shone above. The world was vast and the shadow was deep, but the memory of Beren and Lúthien was a fire, a light that burned through the darkness, a song that no silence could break. In the halls of Imladris, Elrond gathered the wise, the warriors, the bearers of hope. Among them was Galadriel, who had known Lúthien in the days of Doriath, who had seen the light of the Silmaril in Menegroth's halls. Her eyes were bright with the memory of her kinswoman, her heart bound to the song that had sung the star into being. "Their love is our shield," she said, her voice a melody that echoed Lúthien's own. "Their light is our guide. We must carry it as they carried it through the shadow that rises." Her words were a call, a reminder that the memory of Beren and Lúthien was not a relic but a living force, a light that demanded to be born, a song that demanded to be sung. The elves of Imladris and Lindon prepared for war, their swords sharpened, their hearts alight with the fire of their ancestors' love. Men joined them, their voices fierce with the pride of Beren's kin, their hope tied to the star that shone above. The last alliance of elves and men was a tide, a force that swept across Middle-earth, a light that challenged the darkness of Sauron's reign. Gil-galad led the elves, his spear a flash of defiance, his heart bound to the memory of Beren and Lúthien. Eärendil, lord of men, fought beside him, his sword a flame that burned through fear, his spirit woven with the courage of his ancestor Beren. Elrond stood with them, his wisdom a shield, his hope a light that guided their path. The star of Eärendil shone above a beacon that pierced the clouds of Mordor, a reminder that the love of Beren and Lúthien had changed the world and could change it again. The battle was long, its cost written in blood and sorrow. Gil-galad fell, his spear broken, his light joined to the stars. Eärendil fell, his sword shattered, his hope carried by his son Isildur. But the alliance prevailed, Sauron's ring was taken, his shadow broken, his malice cast into the void. Yet the victory was a sorrow, for the world was changed, its light dimmed by the loss of its heroes. Isildur, bearing the ring, felt its weight, its temptation a shadow that echoed the Silmaril's own. The star of Eärendil shone above, a reminder of the love that had carried the Silmaril, of the courage that had defied temptation, of the hope that had sung it into the heavens. But Isildur turned from its light, his heart bound to the ring, his fate a wound that would scar the ages. The world turned and the ages passed. The star of Eärendil shone on a beacon that guided the hearts of the weary, a testament to a love that had changed the world. The elves dwindled their songs, fading into the west, their hearts bound to the light that had been won by Beren and Lúthien. Men rose, their lives brief but fierce, their dreams stirred by a hope that carried the echo of their tale. In the hidden valleys of Imladris, Elrond preserved the memory of Beren and Lúthien, his scrolls a treasure, his songs a light that burned through the ages. He saw their tale in his daughter Arwen, whose beauty echoed Lúthien's, whose heart was bound to a mortal man, Aragorn, a descendant of Beren's kin. Their love was a mirror, a reflection of the tale that had begun in the glades of Neldoreth, a reminder that love is a force that defies time, that carries a light through the darkest nights. Arwen and Aragorn's love was a song, a melody that echoed Beren and Lúthien's, a light that burned against the shadow of Sauron's return. They faced fear-bore burdens, defied temptation, and chose faith not for glory, but for each other, for the hope they kindled in a world grown weary. The star of Eärendil guided them, its light a testament to the love that had won it, the courage that had carried it, the song that had sung it into the heavens. In the final war against Sauron, when the ring was destroyed and the shadow broken, the star shone above a beacon that pierced the clouds of Mordor, a reminder that the love of Beren and Lúthien had changed the world and could change it again. Aragorn, crowned as king, stood with Arwen, their hands entwined, their hearts bound to the memory of their ancestors' love. The world was vast and they were mortal, but they were not alone. The star shone for all, a light that carried the song of Beren and Lúthien, a melody that reached beyond the circles of the world. In Valinor, Eärendil and Elwing watched, their eyes soft with sorrow and joy, their hearts bound to the star that shone above. They saw the world, its triumphs and sorrows, its lights and shadows, its hopes and fears. They saw the echo of Beren and Lúthien's love, a song that sang through the ages, a light that burned in the hearts of those who carried it. They were the keepers of the Silmaril, but they were also its heirs, their lives a testament to the love that had won it, the courage that had carried it, the hope that had sung it into the heavens. The star was a memory, a light that lingered in the world, a song that sang in the hearts of those who saw it. It was a memory of fear-faced burdens borne, temptations defied, and faith chosen. It was a memory of love, of a man and a maid who had walked through the dark hand in hand and emerged with a light that would shine forever. It was a memory of hope, of a world that could be made whole, of a tide that carried the soul forward even when the night was deepest. The world changed its lands, reshaped its peoples, scattered, but the star remained a beacon that guided the weary, a testament to a love that had defied the world and won. The elves sailed west, their songs fading into the mists, their hearts bound to the light that had been won by Beren and Lúthien. Men built new kingdoms, their lives brief but fierce, their dreams stirred by a hope that carried the echo of their tale. In the silence of the heavens, where Vingelá sailed and the Silmaril shone, the memory of Beren and Lúthien lived on, a melody that reached beyond the world, a light that burned through the ages, a love that no time could dim. Their tale was not a triumph of swords or crowns, but of the soul that chooses to love, to hope, to carry a light against the dark. They had faced the shadow of Morgoth, the silence of despair, the temptation of surrender, and they had chosen faith not for glory, but for each other, for the truth they had glimpsed in a glade beneath the stars. Their story was a song, a melody that echoed through the ages, a light that shone in the hearts of those who heard it. It was a song of love, of loss, of a light that no darkness could quench. It was a song of hope, of a world that could be made whole, of a tide that carried the soul forward even when the night was deepest. It was a song of memory, of a man and a maid who had changed the world, whose love had become a star, whose light would shine forever. To triumph over darkness is to carry a light, to love fiercely, to choose hope even when the world offers none. Beren and Lúthien chose, and in their choosing they wove a tale that would echo through the ages, a song that would never fade, a star that no shadow could extinguish. Their memory endured, a light that lingered in the world, a melody that sang in the hearts of those who saw the star, a love that no time could dim. The star of Eärendil hung eternal in the heavens, a radiant Silmaril that burned with the light of Beren and Lúthien's love, a beacon that wove hope into the fabric of Middle-earth's ages. Vingelot, Eärendil's ship, sailed the skies, its prow aglow with the jewel that had been torn from Morgoth's crown, a testament to a mortal man and an elven maid who had defied the darkness with their hearts entwined. Elwing, her wings a shimmer of white, soared beside him, her spirit a spark of her grandparents' song, her love a tide that carried their legacy beyond the circles of the world. Below the world turned its lands, reshaped its peoples scattered. Yet the memory of Beren and Lúthien endured a melody that sang in the stars, in the seas, in the hearts of those who dreamed of light. What is eternity if not the echo of a moment? For Beren and Lúthien, their moment was a love so fierce it had moved the heart of Mandos, shaken the throne of Morgoth, and kindled a star that would shine forever. Their tale was a song, its notes carried through the ages by the elves who sailed west, by the men who built new kingdoms, by the winds that whispered of a world that could still be whole. The star above was their light, a spark of their hope that burned for all to see, a reminder that even in the deepest shadow, a single act of love could weave a thread that time could not unravel. Yet eternity is not a gentle thing. It demands that those who hear its song sing it anew, that they carry its light, that they bear its truth through the tides of change. In Valinor, where the Valar dwelt in their halls of radiance, Eärendil and Elwing stood as keepers of the Silmaril, their lives a bridge between the mortal and the immortal. The star they bore was a symbol of Beren and Lúthien's love, a light that had been won through fear, faced burdens, borne temptations, defied, and faith chosen. They watched the world from the shores of the blessed realm, their eyes soft with sorrow and joy, their hearts bound to the memory of a man and a maid who had changed the course of fate. The Valar in their eternal wisdom saw the star and heard its song, a melody that echoed the music of Ilúvatar, a truth that love could triumph where power alone would fail. The world below was a tapestry of light and shadow, its threads woven with the echoes of Beren and Lúthien's tale. The elves, their numbers dwindling, carried their memory west, their songs a lament for a world lost and a hope for a world yet to come. Men their lives, brief but fierce, rose in the lands of Gondor and Rohan, their hearts stirred by the star's light, their tales rough with the pride of Beren's kin. The star of Eärendil was a bridge, a light that bound the ages, a memory that wove the fates of elves and men into a single song, a reminder that love is a force stronger than death, stronger than despair, stronger than the malice of gods. In the halls of Minas Tirith, where the white tree bloomed and the banners of Gondor flew, the memory of Beren and Lúthien lived on a tale told in the quiet moments when the stars burned bright and the world held its breath. Aragorn, son of Arathorn, stood as king, his heart bound to Arwen, daughter of Elrond, their love a mirror of Beren and Lúthien's own. He was a descendant of Beren's kin, his blood woven with the courage of a mortal who had faced Morgoth's throne. Arwen, her beauty a reflection of Lúthien's, had chosen mortality, her heart tied to the man who had carried hope through the shadow of Sauron's reign. Aragorn stood upon the walls of the city, his eyes fixed on the star of Eärendil, his heart heavy with the weight of memory. He knew the tale of his ancestors, had heard it from Elrond in the halls of Imladris, had felt its truth in the love that bound him to Arwen. "Their light is our guide," he said, his voice steady, his hand resting on Narsil, reforged as Andúril, a blade that carried the echo of Beren's defiance. "Their love is our strength. We carry it as they carried it through the darkness of the world." Arwen stood beside him, her hand in his, her eyes bright with the fire of her grandmother's song. "Their love is a song," she said, her voice a melody that echoed Lúthien's own. "And we sing it in our choices, in our hope, in the light we bear." Their words were a vow, a promise to honor the memory of Beren and Lúthien, to weave their tale into the history of Gondor, to carry their light through the ages yet to come. The people of Gondor heard their tale, their hearts stirred by the story of a mortal man and an elven maid who had defied the dark. The bards sang of them, their voices rising in the halls, their lutes weaving a melody that echoed the glades of Neldoreth, the halls of Menegroth, the throne of Morgoth. They sang of Beren, who had faced fear with a mortal heart, of Lúthien, whose song had moved the heart of doom, of a love that had kindled a star. The men of Gondor listened, their dreams kindled by a light that burned through the ages, their hope a fire that no shadow could quench. In the forests of Lothlorien, where the malern trees glowed with golden light, Galadriel, who had known Lúthien in the days of Doriath, carried the memory of her kinswoman's love. She stood by the mirror of her garden, her eyes fixed on the star above her heart, bound to the song that had sung the Silmaril into the heavens. She had seen the light of the Silmaril in Menegroth's halls, had felt its radiance, had known the cost of its beauty. "Their love is our shield," she said, her voice a whisper that mingled with the wind. "Their light is our guide. We must carry it as they carried it through the shadow that lingers." Her words were a call, a reminder that the memory of Beren and Lúthien was a living force, a light that demanded to be born, a song that demanded to be sung. The elves of Lothlorien sang of them their voices, a melody that echoed through the trees, their hearts alight with the fire of a love that had changed the world. Men came to the borders of the Golden Wood seeking wisdom, seeking hope, and they heard the tale their dreams stirred by a light that burned through the ages. But the world was not free of shadow. The memory of Sauron lingered, his malice a seed that could sprout in the hearts of the weary. The rings of power, though broken, left a wound, a temptation that echoed the Silmarill's own. The star of Eärendil shone above, a reminder of the love that had carried the Silmaril, of the courage that had defied temptation, of the hope that had sung it into the heavens. Yet the world was vast, and the shadow was subtle, and the memory of Beren and Lúthien was a light that demanded to be guarded, to be cherished, to be sung. In the Shire, where the hobbits lived in their quiet holes, the tale of Beren and Lúthien was a whisper, a story told by old Bilbo Baggins in the firelight of Bag End. He had heard it from Elrond, had read it in the scrolls of Imladris, had felt its truth in the courage of Frodo, who had carried a ring that echoed the Silmaril's weight. They were like us, in a way, Bilbo said, his voice soft, his eyes bright with the memory of his own adventures. Small folk against a great dark, but they carried a light, and it changed the world. Frodo listened, his heart heavy with the weight of his own journey, his hand tracing the scar where the ring had hung. He knew the tale of Beren and Lúthien had seen its echo in the love of Aragorn, and Arwen had felt its truth in the hope that had carried him to Mount Doom. The star of Eärendil had guided him, its light a beacon that pierced the clouds of Mordor, a reminder that the love of a man and a maid could triumph where power alone would fail. "Their light is still with us," Frodo said, his voice a whisper, his eyes fixed on the star above. "It shines even now." The hobbits of the Shire, simple and steadfast, carried the memory in their own way, their tales rough with the pride of those who had faced the dark and lived. They spoke of the star, of the love that had kindled it, of a hope that could not be quenched. The star of Eärendil was a light that bound them to the world, a memory that wove their small lives into the great tapestry of Middle-earth, a reminder that even the smallest heart could carry a light that changed the world. In the ages that followed, the world changed its lands, reshaped its peoples, scattered. The elves sailed west, their songs fading into the mists, their hearts bound to the light that had been won by Beren and Lúthien. Men rose, their lives brief but fierce, their dreams stirred by a hope that carried the echo of their tale. The star of Eärendil shone on a beacon that guided the hearts of the weary, a testament to a love that had changed the world. In the halls of Valinor, Eärendil and Elwing watched, their hands entwined, their eyes fixed on the star that shone above. They saw the world, its triumphs and sorrows, its lights and shadows, its hopes and fears. They saw the echo of Beren and Lúthien's love, a song that sang through the ages, a light that burned in the hearts of those who carried it. They were the keepers of the Silmaril, but they were also its heirs, their lives a testament to the love that had won it, the courage that had carried it, the hope that had sung it into the heavens. The star was a memory, a light that lingered in the world, a song that sang in the hearts of those who saw it. It was a memory of fear, faced burdens borne, temptations defied, and faith chosen. It was a memory of love, of a man and a maid who had walked through the dark hand in hand and emerged with a light that would shine forever. It was a memory of hope, of a world that could be made whole, of a tide that carried the soul forward even when the night was deepest. The world turned and the ages passed. The star of Eärendil shone on a beacon that guided the hearts of the weary, a testament to a love that had changed the world. The elves dwindled, their songs fading into the west, their hearts bound to the light that had been won by Beren and Lúthien. Men rose, their lives brief but fierce, their dreams stirred by a hope that carried the echo of their tale. In the quiet of the heavens where Vingilot sailed and the Silmaril shone, the song of Beren and Lúthien lived on, a melody that reached beyond the world, a light that burned through the ages, a love that no time could dim. Their tale was not a triumph of swords or crowns, but of the soul that chooses to love, to hope, to carry a light against the dark. They had faced the shadow of Morgoth, the silence of despair, the temptation of surrender, and they had chosen faith not for glory, but for each other, for the truth they had glimpsed in a glade beneath the stars. Their story was a song, a melody that echoed through the ages, a light that shone in the hearts of those who heard it. It was a song of love, of loss, of a light that no darkness could quench. It was a song of hope, of a world that could be made whole, of a tide that carried the soul forward even when the night was deepest. It was a song of eternity, of a man and a maid who had changed the world, whose love had become a star, whose light would shine forever. The star of Eärendil was their legacy, a light that shone for all the world, a hope that no darkness could dim. It was a reminder that love is a force stronger than death, stronger than despair, stronger than the malice of gods. It was a reminder that to triumph over darkness is not to banish it, but to carry a light to love fiercely, to choose hope, even when the world offers none. In the silence of the world where the stars burned and the seas sang, the song of Beren and Lúthien never ended. It lived in the hearts of those who saw the star, who heard the tale, who dreamed of a world made whole. It lived in the love of Aragorn and Arwen, in the courage of Frodo, in the hope of all who carried a light against the dark. It lived in the songs of the elves, in the tales of men in the winds that whispered of a love that had defied the world and won. The star shone on a beacon that guided the weary, a testament to a love that had changed the world. The world was vast and the shadow was deep, but the song of Beren and Lúthien was a tide, a force that carried their light from the glades of Neldoreth to the halls of Mandos, from the throne of Morgoth to the heavens above. It was a tide that carried Elwing and Eärendil, that carried Aragorn and Arwen, that carried the hope of a world made whole. Their story was not finished, for no true story ever is. It lingered in the songs of the elves, in the dreams of men in the stars that burned above. It lingered in the light of Eärendil's star, a beacon that shone for all the world, a hope that no darkness could quench. It lingered in the world, a melody that sang of love, of loss, of a light that no shadow could silence. To triumph over darkness is to carry a light, to love fiercely, to choose hope, even when the world offers none. Beren and Lúthien chose, and in their choosing they wove a tale that would echo through the ages, a song that would never fade, a star that no shadow could extinguish. Their love was a melody, a light, a truth that reached beyond the world, a song that never ends, a love that shines forever.